Reports of smoke at the downtown crossing station caused severe disruptions across the subway system. Shuttle buses replaced Red Line service between Harvard and JFK UMass and Orange Line service between Back Bay and North Station. And separate shuttle buses that are filling in for Green Line trolleys amid ongoing track repairs were extended to run between Copley and North Station. Bob C., GBH News, 89.7.
Hey, Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Yeakin. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting from a little snow down here at the Boston Public Library. We are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. We hope soon to be streaming on facebook.com/GBH News. Having a little trouble at the moment. We hope it gets up in a little while. This Friday, and then Monday, Tuesday of next week, we will be broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire for the first primary in the nation. You can listen on 89.7 or watch on YouTube and Facebook, of course, there as well. Or today you can come down to the Boston Public Library here and see us in person with Mayor Wu and the other guests we're having, and of course get something to eat at the Newsfeed Cafe. Hey, Jim.
Hey, they can also come this Friday, next Monday, and Tuesday, because they're going to broadcast our broadcast from New Hampshire right here at the library.
Oh.
Oh.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll be on TV here at the library. That's exciting.
That is correct. It's amazing how the technology works.
It's
By the way, Henry
it's a wonderful thing.
Henry said a minute ago it's time for Ask the Mayor. It's not quite time for Ask the Mayor because the mayor's a little bit late.
Yep.
We were told she'll be here in 5 minutes. But you know what the beauty of her being late is? It gives us an opportunity to talk about something I'm sure made you really happy. What's your take? We're going to talk about this with Sue O'Connell and then with listeners a little later in the show, and with the mayor probably too. What's your take on the results out of Iowa last night?
Well, I told you before, my freshman year college roommate grew up in Bettendorf, Iowa.
Right. She lives here now, right?
She lives here now. Yeah. She sent me a text yesterday
What'd she
saying,
say?
"Hell freezes over." I thought that was a great
pretty good line.
Yeah, it was a great line.
Good line.
Trump basically, well, if you want to be optimistic, you could say half of the GOP did not go with him because he only got 50% of the vote. But
Marjorie, it is the
largest
margin in a contested
Iowa
caucus
There's no
in American history.
There's no question about it.
In history, ever.
They love him out there. They love him out there. You know what there is in Iowa?
What?
A lot of pigs and a lot of corn.
Well, it's a very diverse population. That was really heartening to see all the caucus goers interviewed as they came in. It's one of the whitest states in the country. Only 115,000 people showed up. And by the way, I mean, I'm not criticizing them for that. Obviously, snow was an inhibitor in terms of them coming. But and the other heartening thing, I guess you could say, is Iowa on the Republican side has not picked the Republican nominee unless the person was an incumbent.
No, Ted Cruz
in recent times
was the last.
And Rick Santorum. And somebody else.
You know, I think that Iowa is not. I'm hoping again that Iowa is not indicative of much of the rest of the nation. It's very rural. It's very white, as you point out. It's hugely evangelical. Although there's been more and more written now about evangelical doesn't mean you're religious anymore. It basically means you have an ideology that you're sticking to.
Yeah.
You maybe call yourself an evangelical. You don't haven't gone to church in years, but it's about your ideology and your identity, and that identity is with Donald Trump.
Well,
and
also it seems to me. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What was incredible is that what was the numbers? People that don't believe Biden was really elected president.
68%, I think, in the CNN poll of the caucus goers
68%
said Biden is not the legitimate president.
And significant numbers of people said they didn't care if he was convicted of anything.
70% said that.
And that's because when you listen to these interviews with voters out there, they just think this is all a big conspiracy, that Joe Biden is going after Donald Trump, and this has all been an unfair attack on the president. So, I mean, it's another world.
Well, let me just say, I think it's pretty clear that the importance of New Hampshire, if there's a Stop Trump movement, takes on huge importance. And I would say, the mayor's going to be here at 11:15. We just got a note, snow making traffic bad for her, which I guess is
we could take a couple of calls on Trump in the meantime.
No, not really, because they're all calling for Mayor Wu. We can talk. Okay. I mean, I could talk about this thing for about a month. What I started to say was the New Hampshire primary takes on added importance. John King may disagree. He'll be with us at 1:15. I would say after the crushing of Haley and DeSantis in Iowa yesterday, if Haley, who was inching closer, gets crushed at the end of the day in New Hampshire, this whole thing is over. I mean, they go on to South Carolina, or at least the polling shows
I think it is.
She is getting crushed in her home state. But I don't agree that it's over. If she beats him, and she has been surging until Iowa, and she didn't invest nearly as much attention to Iowa as DeSantis did. I think if she beats him in New Hampshire, it potentially changes the dynamic of the race. But last night was surely not a good sign. You really got,
Don't forget,
by the way,
Jim,
what?
She said that New Hampshire was going to correct.
I know
the vote
that was probably
Iowa.
pretty stupid thing to do.
She probably lost a lot of votes with that remark. But we'll see. I think it's over. I mean, I think that Trump is, as he said 8 years ago, could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. He wouldn't lose a single person. And I think he could get indicted and convicted. He could get indicted many times again and get convicted of one of these things, whether it's hoarding those classified documents, whether it's insurrection on January 6th, and it wouldn't matter.
Well, I have to say, I'm not sure. Now I'm going to play you. You're the one who's not as worried as I am.
Well, I still think Biden's going to win.
Well, I know. I think convictions. I mean, the convention we looked up this morning is in July.
Right.
If he's got a serious conviction on his record when they go to the convention, I am assuming there's going to be a decent amount of public division, and I think it will hurt him. By the way, a conviction, you and I are of the opinion, if someone was convicted of the kinds of things of which he is accused in these 91 indictments, he should not only lose a presidential election, he should go to jail. The issue is not everybody turning on him. This is almost a dead heat race. Trump is leading Biden in virtually all of the key swing states, but by a handful of points. If he loses a handful of Republicans who think a crime is a bridge too far, he loses the presidency. So I think how fast the criminal justice system moves will be a huge determinant of what happens in November.
You know what I wonder? You look at these polls now, and again, the election is many, many months away, but he is losing a lot of young voters, which I'd love to know what that's about, because the big things that young voters are at odds with him over, with Trump that is, are abortion and climate. And it's the young people who are going to face the worst of this climate mess that we're seeing getting more horrible every day.
Yeah, but I think I can answer the question. I mean, I've read a lot of those polls about you. First of all, young people were won by roughly 25 points by Biden in 2020. It's now a dead heat with Trump, which is just incredible. I'd say it's two things. One, it's his age, and while we can say, as we always say, Trump is only, 3 years younger, he acts a lot younger, he behaves a lot younger. And secondly, while the Inflation Reduction Act includes more money to address climate change than any piece of legislation in American history, when you hear interviews, and I've listened to a lot of them, when you hear interviews with young people, they don't mention that. You know what they mention? The Willow Project in Alaska, the drilling, violating the campaign pledge that there be no more drilling
I
like
get
that.
that. I get that. But Trump is a climate change denier. So I'm not clear, as mad as you may be about Willow, how you want to go with someone who doesn't think we have a problem, or someone that is talking about placating Republicans and issuing a federal ban on abortion, which Trump has done. I just don't know how they switch over. What I'm hoping is
By the way, Asa Hutchinson, former governor of Arkansas, former head of the DEA, we just got a note, has dropped out of the race. And that's really incredible considering he got about 11 votes in Iowa yesterday. I don't mean to be disrespectful. He was the only person other than Chris Christie, and he wasn't as outspoken as Christie, but at least had the courage to say that Donald Trump obviously is not fit for the presidency. And by the way, Hutchinson is a rock-ribbed conservative Republican. He's not some, liberal Massachusetts kind of moderate Charlie Baker, Bill Weld kind of Republican. And Hutchinson had the courage to do and say exactly what any principled grown-up would say, that Donald Trump is not qualified to, I don't mean technically qualified, he is not fit to be the president of the United States again.
There was a great piece by a guy named Michael Bender and Katie Glueck in the New York Times today talking about Trump being the most durable force in American politics. And they begin the piece by saying that Bill Clinton once explained the nation's two political parties by saying Democrats want to fall in love and Republicans want to fall in line. Well, that is no longer true regarding former President Donald Trump.
We're joined now by Mayor Michelle Wu. She's with us till noon for her first Ask the Mayor of 2024. Hello, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Sorry I'm late.
Boy.
I'm hiking over in the snow.
I am impressed. Somebody from your staff just called and said she's going to be here at 11:15 because the snow is bad, and it is exactly 11:15.
Very impressive.
Better be on time late, too.
Usually you say 11:15, it's 11:20, it's 11:25. So thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for accurately predicting when you were going to show up here this morning.
Do you mind if I ask you, is it a I don't mean, what is a transportation issue for you this morning?
It was a number of things, but I was coming from our cabinet meeting. We didn't leave enough time to leave.
But it's not because you couldn't get through the streets or that kind of thing?
No. Everything was moving slower. And yeah, I think the T's shut down for a little bit too.
Poor T.
Well, I was going to say, so you didn't take the T.
No.
Was there a fire in downtown Crossing?
Electrical
issues. Okay.
When you hear that, I'm sorry. When you hear that, she's smiling if you're not watching on YouTube or if you're not here. When you hear that, by the way, we've praised Philip Ang. Our initial impressions of him
the best
are all good.
Yeah, he's great.
And he's transparent. He's all this stuff. But when you hear those kinds of things on such a regular basis, what's in your head?
It's almost like just say, we couldn't get it together, guys. Like,
I know. It's like,
wow.
Electrical. I don't know. I think commuters. It is the 2023 Person of the Year are MBTA commuters.
That's right. They are long-suffering and they persevere. Henry Santoro just announced that there was another problem on the T, and then he says, surprise, surprise, another problem on the MBTA.
We're getting there, though. I'm very confident in the general manager, and we're making great progress.
Yeah. So, Mayor, you gave the State of the City address just recently. Tell people what the high points were. What did you mostly focus on?
It's, I'll just share here, it's quite an intense experience. One, there's no other venue where I am talking for 30 minutes straight anywhere. I do a lot of talking, but that in and of itself is an experience. And it's the only time in the year where we get that basically in uninterrupted time directly through all the TV stations, generously covering it, and news coverage, just the chance to maximize our odds of connecting with residents about a big picture context more than just one soundbite here or there. And so we take it very seriously. And in our administration, we try to use it as a way to really be clear about why we've been doing what we've been doing, what we have accomplished so far, and what's going to happen in the year ahead. I've been in a lot of these events, and often there's big pronouncements that rely on very unpredictable things, or more big picture wishes rather than specific commitments and goals. And we, sometimes I'll get the feedback, why didn't you make any gigantic announcement about moving City Hall to the Seaport or wherever it is? We want to be very honest with residents. This is what we're doing, and this is what the next year will entail. And so it takes a lot of time, months within the administration, of organizing what the policy plans are, how all that fits together. Every single sentence in there is tied to at least one, if not multiple departments specific work, vetting it and planning it and being able to follow through on that. So it's a great opportunity. This year, I talked about the idea of Boston being a home for everyone, not just having a house, but the entire experience of what it means to feel at home in every part of our city and to really include every community member in that.
You know, by the way, you couldn't move City Hall at Seaport because they'd have to put it on pontoons, which obviously is going to be very difficult. Before we get to the calls, and the lines are full already. The number's 877-301-8970. If you're at the library, if you brave the weather, which is really not that bad for those who were nervous about coming, Hannah, our colleague, is right over there. If you can raise your hand, Hannah. And if you fill out a card, there's a good chance you get to talk to the mayor directly. I want to talk about one other speech. We were on the air, we're almost on the air, when you spoke yesterday at the Martin Luther King breakfast. And I want to ask your opinion a year after the dedication of the Embrace, how we're doing in the city on racial equity issues. But before we do that, there's one part of your speech which was pretty intense, I thought. You were addressing something I think we talked to you about last month, the criticism you took all over the place for this Christmas party of electeds of color. And here's part of what the mayor said yesterday at the Martin Luther King breakfast.
I am tired of those fearmongers and mob baiters who fan the flames and call for unity. Viral outrage ricocheted internationally as those who had never before cared about representation railed against this as exclusionary.
Could you expand on what you were thinking and saying yesterday a little bit, Mayor Wu?
Yeah, it cut out one part right in the middle of there, which maybe they were trying to make me seem less controversial. But I was sharing this sentiment that in this moment, this is broader than government and politics. It's connected to what we see happening in universities and academia, but it's connected to lots of examples all across the business sector and in people's daily lives where there is a push to say the way to not be divisive is in fact to never talk about race, to never bring up programs that should be specifically trying to address disparities, and essentially to pretend that any mention of racial inequities is dividing people further. And so I had said in the middle of those two chunks of statements that there is this call to say, you need to unite us, but when they say, don't divide us, it really means don't defy us, right? We want to keep things how they were. We want to continue upholding structures that haven't been working for our community at large. And we've seen this play out in situation after situation, and it's reflected around the country, in some cases much more than in Boston, around what books people are allowed to read, what curriculum can be used, the portrayal of certain moments in our history in a very distorted way. And we feel that here locally as well. And so my charge to the room was, as we think about the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it is a commitment not just to peace and justice in a warm, fuzzy way of we're moving beyond differences between people, but action to specifically address what needs to be done, and that still requires a lot of work.
Can we talk about one specific, and then we promise we'll get to the calls at 877-301-8970. During the NAACP convention, we were broadcasting live from there. We met Rose Starum from Rosemark Productions, and she does events, and Ricardo Pierre-Louis, who did privé parking. And they got really significant contracts there. Rose was talking about the fact she's done things for presidents of the United States, but had never had a contract, a major contract.
Rose was just
in
here
Boston before.
She was just the main organizer when Secretary Yellen came into town.
Oh, when she went to RCC?
That event, yeah.
Well, that's interesting to hear, because we asked, and we had them back last week, because they were very excited and benefited from what the NAACP of Boston and you decided in terms of contracting during the NAACP. And we had them back and said, is the city and are the promises being realized? And here's a little bit of what Rose had to say. She said she was hired by the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts for a successful 2-day event, but she went on to say here, this.
But they are a Black owned business. So Rosemark has yet to be contracted again in Boston by a non-Black owned business, which is a little disappointing, but we're striving forward.
And Ricardo said that he is in, and by the way, they both praised you, I should say, and they praised you. And Ricardo said his company is in line for a parking contract that the BPTA is bidding out. And he said historically a publicly traded company from California has gotten it. He hopes he gets it this time. How do you think you are doing in terms of follow-up to commitments at the NAACP?
We are tracking very carefully in terms of the numbers. We're at 12% as of the last count of the proportion of contracting dollars that are going to what are called MBEs, minority business enterprises, the technical term, businesses owned by people of color. That number historically has been under 1% for decades and decades. When then Councilor Presley and I first wrote the ordinance to even start getting the city to measure this, it came back as 0.65% was the first report. I think that must have been in 2016 or 17. And it's been under 1% since we got into office. It was boosted to 5% in our first year, 12% over this last year. And we have set a clear goal of surpassing 25%. That is the minimum that we need to be doing. But it's more than, oftentimes when you talk about what's going to happen over the next year or what the goals are for the city, it's easy to say 25%, let's do it, and then things don't change. There are very specific steps that have been taken. So to get from less than 1% to 5% to 12%, we created, for the first time, a buying plan for the city to ask departments to be clear based on what their previous multi-year contracts have been, what are the contracts that are upcoming so that the potential bidders can prepare rather than just checking the portal every day and seeing what ends up getting posted as a bidding opportunity. We created a sheltered markets program through an ordinance at the City Council that identifies specific places where the bidders are targeted to Black and brown businesses or businesses that represent the type of disparity that's reflected in the contracting dollars relative to the availability of businesses in the community according to the legal standards. We also worked with the state legislature to raise the thresholds where the city can issue contracts that aren't as bound by the many long time periods subject to 30B procurement law that allows us to be more intentional with how we issue those contracts through written quotes and who we invite to bid on those contracts. And so it's been a lot of work along the way. We have more work to do in terms of continuing to break down the school contracts that are going out, the housing, affordable housing contracts that are going out. Every component, we're trying to not just make an opportunity available, but directly communicate with the potential bidders, create training programs, create incentive structures. When we announced our Welcome Home Boston program, which is 150 vacant lots that will be developed into smaller multifamily affordable housing, we sat with a coalition of developers of color to say, how do we take down barriers so that you all will be in the best possible position to bid on these parcels? And they raised the issue, for example, of pre-development costs. Even before you buy the materials, you have to pay the architect, you have to survey this land, get the lawyers, and that can add up. And so we've now taken that feedback and created a fund to help offset pre-development costs for some of those bidders as well. So every time we can identify one more barrier to take down, we are taking an opportunity and trying to connect that with every possible city dollar that's going out the door. One other program that has been really innovative under the leadership of Chief Sugun Idawu of our Economic Opportunity and Inclusion Cabinet is our SCALE program. So this is federal recovery dollars that are specifically going to build capacity for our local companies to bid on contracts, to have the capacity to bid on larger contracts. And we know this goes right back into our community because in addition to the percentage of MBE dollars that has doubled, we've also doubled the percentage of dollars going to Boston-based businesses headquartered here in the city.
Fair enough. That's the mayor of the city of Boston. She's with us until noon.
Adam from Boston, thank you for calling.
Hello, Adam.
Yes, hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie. Good morning, Mayor Wu. How are you?
Great.
Just wanted to ask about the orange line, red line thing this morning. What's the plan for the MBTA to keep this from happening again? I mean, the green line is closed today for construction, the red line and the orange line for busing. It's getting better now, I know, but it's getting to the point where it's unacceptable. And I'd like to know if the MBTA, maybe you encourage them to hold an emergency board meeting on this issue tomorrow. I mean, thousands of people were inconvenienced today. So I guess my question is, what's the reaction and what can the T do? And also, hopefully, Jim and Marjorie will have Philip hang on. Again, that was awesome. So thank you again, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to the many people who are affected on a daily basis, trying to get where they need to go to contribute to the city, to get to work, to pick up their kids. And the transportation system is a barrier rather than a mechanism to help connect all the pieces of your lives. We, at the city level, are working very closely with the MBTA to support as rapid a transformation as possible. There are costs to delaying decisions, and what the T and General Manager Eng and the Governor's administration are dealing with now really is a compounded effect of many decades. And I truly believe that they have done more in 8 months of his leadership than was moved forward in years before that. And so it will get worse before it gets better in terms of some of the shutdowns that might be required, or just the scope of fixes to actually solve the problem. But I believe that we've turned a corner with the MBTA taking on a mindset rather than just trying to stretch out the pain or paper over it here and there, to actually address head-on what's needed, even if that means short-term pain and inconvenience, that in the long run and hopefully sooner than later, we will be in a place where we're experiencing improvements. And I know on the Red Line, for example, the shutdown that happened several months ago did lead to significantly improved times. We need to get to the point where it's not just trains being able to move faster on those same tracks, but greater frequency and shorter wait time in between trains coming. I think that's the headways are really what affect people's decisions to take the T or not. We now have a seat on the MBTA board and are working very closely with them. And I'm planning to be much more, the team said I wasn't allowed to make the full, anyway, I am going to be.
Whoa. What was the end of that sentence?
I'm trying not to advertise this too widely, but it's really important how we get around. And so as we think about how I experience the city and my opportunity to be in community with people, to hold office hours, we're going to try to tack that onto transportation and commuting to work, and make sure that I'm helping give voice to what still needs to be done.
Do you talk to Eng regularly?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, he's a very impressive guy, so we're very hopeful. You know, Mayor, the Globe has done a lot of great reporting about problems with kids learning to read all around the Commonwealth. They just had a story that said 40% of kids who took the 10th grade MCAS in English did not meet proficiency benchmarks. And they pointed out the MCAS is the only way they find out if kids are having these terrible problems. But they focused in on a couple of kids in Boston. But the big thing I wanted to ask you about was apparently Boston's going to have this major literacy overhaul, and they're going to have reading skills 3 times a year screened. But there's changing, I think, to a new way of teaching reading, because apparently all around the Commonwealth, in rich districts too, they've been teaching reading the wrong way, and kids haven't been able to learn to read. So what's going on?
Yeah, this has been one of the superintendent's major priorities, and the implementation is well underway now. I think we are solidly in the 1.5 year of implementing what's called equitable literacy in the district. And the idea is that reading is fundamental to everything. It's, of course, at the most the basic level, it's about being able to process how letters fit together and phonics and words, and then words to sentences. But you can't be successful at processing the information to do math at a certain level, or to understand your history classes, or any other subject, unless that reading comprehension is really solid as the foundation for everything else. And so we are focusing on equitable literacy.
Is this phonics?
It's grounded in, it's more above my pay grade in terms of understanding the educational philosophies, but the way that it's been boiled down that I try to share is it's grounded in really a neuroscience, what they call the science of reading approach to how to build up a young person into being able to read and process information and comprehend at the earliest ages.
Okay.
And then at the kind of more advanced levels, it's really taking a look at the materials that are being used, the type of text, the language, the kind of entry points into that. And there's been an overhaul of the curriculum and materials as well, so that what our students are reading is much more reflective of their personal experiences, their cultures, their identities than traditionally has been used in some of these old school reading materials. And the way that BPS has approached this is we haven't had a unified cohesive academic vision for some time. This is the place where across every school, every grade, equitable literacy has been the unifying force. It's shared professional development, it's shared understanding. The regional network that BPS has in supporting groups of schools by geographic area has layered in literacy coaches and coaching, not just for the young people who may need extra supports, but for educators as well, to get real-time feedback on how it's going. And we've gotten really great response from the educators saying this has been very helpful, consistent, and really impactful in being able to see the results.
I just want to be clear, this is moving away from the so-called low-quality reading methods
right.
that Jeff Riley, the Commissioner of Education, has complained about, to a more what they call phonics-based, sounding out words way of learning to read.
Yeah, Boston's a little bit ahead of the curve because we began this a number of years ago, and we're well into implementation now.
Let's take one more call before the break. Paula in Somerville, you're next with Mayor Wu of Boston. Hi, Paula. Paula?
Hello?
Hi, you're on. Shoot.
Oh, hi. Hi, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
So it is abundantly clear that we are witnessing a genocide of the Palestinian people. 24,000 people are dead, and the numbers are continuing to rise. Yesterday, I watched a video of a Palestinian doctor having to amputate his own daughter's leg. These acts of violence are being supported by the United States and by Boston, who gives over $10 million a year to fund the Israeli military. I've been among the thousands of people marching weekly, Jewish, Muslim people of all backgrounds, calling for the genocide to finally end. With thousands dead, thousands and thousands of men, women, children, why have you, Senator Ed Markey, Warren, all of these representatives who are supposed to represent us, why have they been silent on calling for a ceasefire and provision of humanitarian aid to Gaza?
Thank you, Paula.
We feel the hurt so deeply in our local community as well. It's just unfathomable to imagine, even at a very high level, so far away from the conflict, what it means to lose so many tens of thousands of lives, 2/3 women and children, people who are just trying to survive and take care of their families. In Boston, we are looking to ensure that we're creating safety for everyone here. That is my primary focus, to support our federal delegation as they take the positions and actions that they were elected to do, and then on the ground to ensure that the corresponding impacts from this, the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and the interconnections with a much more visible presence of hate and violence everywhere in our country, that we can be a city where all voices are heard and that everyone can be in community with each other.
Before we take a break, Senator Warren has actually joined Bernie Sanders in saying that funding for Israel should have conditions attached, which it hasn't in the past. Do you share her perspective?
I don't know enough, to be totally honest. I like to weigh in on things where I feel confident in my knowledge and my expertise. My knowledge and expertise is in the city of Boston, and so I support our federal delegation in the work that they're doing to try to make sure they're advocating for what is best.
You know, Mayor Wu, before we go, I'm getting several texts rather. I wasn't aware of this, but several people are saying that police officers in Boston are trained by the Israeli military, and people are upset about that and wondering why. I was not aware of this. Are you aware of this?
I talked to Commissioner Cox about this just to understand, because I've heard this bubble up in a couple different spaces. It seems that I think what people are referring to is that there have in the past been exchange programs between the Israeli army and different leadership roles within police departments around the world. Boston has not participated in this in some time, and we have not been participating.
So these people are incorrect. They're texting about this.
If this is the program they're talking about, which I believe the commissioner, my
Boston
understanding
police
is that
officers
it is,
receiving military training from the Israeli military forces.
we have not taken part in that anytime recently.
Okay. We're talking with the mayor of the city of Boston. She's going to be with us to the top of the hour. You can reach her at 877-301-8970. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Are we back on Facebook yet? We're not back yet on facebook.com/GBH News. We'll let you know when we are. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm sorry about that. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at Facebook. No, we're not. Which one are we not streaming at? Thank you. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thursday night, we leave for New Hampshire. Marjorie and I will be broadcasting live with our team Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. Tuesday is obviously the primary in Manchester, New Hampshire. You can listen on 89.7, watch on YouTube or Facebook, or come to the library where we'll be streaming on the screens here at the Newsfeed Cafe. For the rest of the hour, we continue to be joined by the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, who as always bearing gifts. You want to tell us what you brought?
Okay, show and tell this month is from a small business that I highlighted in the State of the City called Flourish and Foundry. They are one of our 20-some space grant recipients, and that program, the acronym SPACE, it was supporting pandemic-affected commercial enterprises, and the idea was that with so many vacancies, we have to not only matchmake between entrepreneurs in those spaces, but help support the build out and some of the other costs that go into even making that possible. And so we had a great crop of businesses moving into much needed downtown and other high traffic retail spaces to fill. This one is on Tremont Street, right by Downtown Crossing, and they are a home goods store that really represents all of the exciting work and talent and ideas in our community.
Well,
Say the
let me
name
tell
one
you.
more time, if you would.
Flourish and Foundry.
Flourish
and I
and
have a
Foundry.
beautiful, beautiful candle that smells absolutely wonderful.
Check
Very
them out.
kind.
Yes,
Thank
ethically
you so
sourced,
much.
low impact, etc.
877-301-8970 is the number if you want to call Mayor Wu for the next 16 and a half minutes. Kip and Dedham, you're on with the mayor. Hey.
Hello, Mayor Wu. How are you?
Great, how are you?
Good. I live on the Iniking Parkway, right on the Dedham-Boston line, and it, of course, goes through Hyde Park, Boston, West Roxbury. The trash is absolutely terrible and disgusting, and there are no barrels, no signs, there is no cameras, there's no deterrent. And I've done my Mike Dukakis imitation and gone down to DCR with my own bag of trash, and they said simply that, you know, there's plenty of chiefs, but there's no Indians. There's no people to work. And they've got 300,000 acres. And never bring up a problem without a solution, but, you know, we've got migrants in a lot of these local hotels that would, I'm sure, like to work and make some money. It's not terrible work.
What's your question? Hey, Kip. Good. What's your question?
My question is, how are we going to solve this problem? Is there any solution to help the DCR with this?
Yeah, thank you for raising this, and thank you for, thank you for taking matters into your own hands. So just be careful. You know, it's a challenge. The spaces that you're talking about out there, I know exactly which spaces, and they are state owned and therefore state maintained. I can check in with the team to see what kind of arrangements we have, but we understand at the city level, and all my colleagues in elected office know that when a constituent calls about an issue, they don't care who it is who's actually the one that needs to fix it, whether it's the city council or mayor's office or state legislature or state administration. We want to get it done. And so we've actually been working to try to cross some of those boundaries that are, city does this, state does that. On snow removal, for example, technically the city is not supposed to clear snow from the state-owned roadways in the city. And we would always have this patchwork afterwards where we would do our thing. The state has a lot of ground to cover, and sometimes they would do their thing at different times, or we'd push it onto their side, they'd push it back over to ours. And so we actually coordinated and now have a list of Ukraine Way, for example, in some of these little spaces where there's a jurisdictional issue. We have not done it as proactively on the parks and open space side, so I will definitely bring this up. And I really am grateful for Commissioner Arrigo, who is in charge of DCR now. He's a former mayor, totally gets it on these basic bread and butter issues. So I will raise it and see what we can do out there.
Kip, thanks for the call. Have you seen the inflated clowns?
I haven't gotten to in person yet. I can't wait.
How great is, it's great, isn't it? There's all this public art stuff is just terrific.
It goes along, at the State of the City, I was describing how home means feeling like you belong, but home also includes feeling wonder and joy and sparking your imagination, and public art is a huge piece of that. It also helps get people back downtown, helps our small businesses. It all fits together. And it's some of what we're trying to do as well with the announcement we made about the 6 incredible cultural institutions, from the art museums to the aquarium and the zoo and the children's museum, the science museum, who are coming together for the first time across all of their institutions to say we're making the first and second Sundays free for all BPS students and their families. And the idea, again, is to get you to look around, enjoy, tap into something deep inside you, and whether that's public art or inside our institutions, it's really important to make it
Was that
meaningful.
the issue where they started applauding before you even said it because they had the transcript?
Yeah.
Was that what it was? It was. That's great.
But you spoke
That's
about
great.
how much this mattered to you when you were a kid growing up. Tell me what you said about that.
Yeah, I shared that, and we had done 2 or 3 read-throughs of the speech before. I had not been able to get through that part without bawling through the practice. That was the first time I managed to do it, kind of holding it together. But it was a really emotional story for me, talking about how my mom used to tell me all growing up about how before I was old enough to remember, she figured out that the Art Institute of Chicago had free Tuesdays. And so she would take me and spend the whole day there before she could speak English, before she had any sense of stability or any way to afford experience like that otherwise. And she would tell me constantly about it, sometimes in a kind of, you know how much I did for you? I figured out how to haul you downtown. And then sometimes it was in a way to remind me of how much was inside me that they had poured into me that I didn't even know yet, how important it was, and just to remember that they had tried their best to give me the world with every resource they had, and it was so special to them, that the opportunity to be in one of the world's leading art museums, to see paintings and works of art that connect you to the kind of history of the world and your place in the scheme of things. And we have all that here in Boston, but we need to make sure that our young people and their families can get that experience too.
David and JP are on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, David.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie. Hello,
Hi.
Mayor Wu.
Hello.
This is
Hi.
David Sandak calling from Jamaica Plain. Mayor Wu, I know you're so committed to Franklin Park. I even saw you the other day there looking at a rainbow with me over White Stadium.
Yes,
And
I
everyone
remember.
knows the reason. Everyone knows the reason why a rainbow was coming over JP the other day is that we are getting a professional women's soccer team. And it's so exciting and so grateful for your stewardship of this. However, just as the team has moved forward at a rapid pace of development, I'm calling to just encourage you and your team and Morgan to move the city's process along. While the city has put forward some answers, there are a lot of lingering questions of the impacts that will happen on the neighborhood, and the neighbors and abutters are being asked to provide their voice in regards to the Article 80 submission without the city coming forward with respect to what the impacts will be on the park, on traffic, on parking, and on the neighborhood. So I would just really encourage the city to catch up to the team to try to provide answers to some neighbors that are getting more and more anxious over time. And the last thing I would just add is that I would also encourage you and thank you for the commitment you've made to the park by investing in the action plan and bringing increased maintenance workers to the park. But I would just like to point out that we still have a long way to go to fully fund the Franklin Park Action Plan. And I would encourage the city to consider that any lease payments that are derived from the stadium would go to help provide funding towards that community-driven action plan.
David, let's get a response.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the call. Let's get a response from
Thank
the mayor.
you. Well, first, it was fun to see you there. Now I remember exactly what the setting was, and your children are absolutely beautiful, and I'm so happy that they get the chance to spend time in the park like mine do. It's really just such a gift that we have. I had a whole long rambling section about Olmsted in the State of the City speech that had to get cut because of time, but I've been spending a lot of time carrying around the action plan, the multi-100-page document, going through all the pieces of it, and trying to make sure we are making the most of this moment, because each generation has the chance to steward the natural resources that are given that have been passed down to us from generations before, and it's our choice. Do we develop it? Do we take it and do something with it for what feels like a very urgent need in this moment, or do we give the gift of passing down that open space and nurturing it to the generation after us? There is so much that we have to do for Franklin Park, right? It is a gem. It is Olmsted's masterpiece. He designed it after designing Central Park and so many of the most well-known national parks nationally. He then came back to Boston, lived here, and this was really the culmination of his ideas and his work, and we have not maintained that park in the 100-some years since it was given to us, and have carved it up in different ways. And so I agree with you that there's a lot of work to do, and that we have to get it right, even in the immediate steps. How the Overlook and the Alma Lewis Playhouse plans fit into the stadium plans, and the Grove, and the views, and the sightlines, and the Playstead, and how to make sure that this is a force for integrating and connecting the park rather than walling off different sections of it is really important to the team, to my team and our administration. And I will just say, in terms of some of the abutters impacts, I was kind of listening during the most recent IAG meeting on this as well. I hear loud and clear the requests for resident parking to be able to manage resident parking designations, to be able to manage some of what is anticipated. That is high on our list to make sure that we can make some decisions, plan ahead, and then work with community members to implement it so that it's a benefit for everyone, including those who live closest nearby.
David, thanks for the call.
Mayor, will you make an announcement today about nursing and emergency services career pathways? What's that about?
Yes, that'll be tomorrow. But we it's very exciting. We'll have more details to share tomorrow at 11. But this is a major partnership between the Edward M. Kennedy Academy for Health Careers and Mass General Brigham, bringing together a workforce pipeline, but more importantly, taking a huge step forward in modeling our commitment, our plan to ensure that every single high school student is college and career ready. So this will be an integration and coordination unlike ever seen before here in the city, with one of our major anchor institutions and employers in a very important field for the health and well-being of everyone in our community.
Tomorrow at 11, Jody, who is at the mic in the Newsfeed Cafe, you're on. You're talking to the mayor of the city of Boston. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor. It truly is. And I'm here for two reasons. One is an invitation, but one is also a question regarding a tragedy that occurred in my life. First of all, I'm part of Moms Demand Action. On the 27th, there is an event regarding unsolved homicides, and we would like to invite you to that. It will be in Roxbury, and we would love to see you there, and we think it's important because of our world and the gun violence in our world. I had the tragedy happen to me. My daughter, Olivia, 17 years old, a senior in high school, was shot by my husband and murdered. He shot me in my left temple where the bullet shattered my jaw, so every day I live in intense pain, emotionally and physically. Then he shot himself. So this event is for unsolved homicides, but my question is, gun violence and domestic violence are related, and the numbers are huge, yet we hear nothing about domestic violence, but yet every day we hear about gun violence in the city and in our state, let's face it. So my question to you is, what's being done? I've spoken in front of Congress. What's being done?
Jody, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here, for your example and your strength, and even in sharing your story. I'm sure there are countless people who feel a sense of comfort and being seen, and I know we are all just so sorry for what happened to your family, and want to do everything that we can to make sure that our community is one where situations like that don't have to cross the mind of anyone who's living in our city. You're absolutely exactly right that has to be the focus. When we talk about gun violence, we often use that as shorthand for certain subsets of violence that in fact are just one part of what adds up to the toll of trauma and lives taken and changed in our community. And domestic violence is a very significant piece of that. We track our numbers very carefully in Boston, and we have been marking progress in terms of downward trends. The last 2 years in a row have been the lowest levels of gun violence overall ever recorded in the city, starting from when real records were kept just a few decades ago. But we know that within the subsets of what all that gun violence represents, there's a lot more work to do. And so the organizations on the ground, there couldn't be better partners who are advocating for survivors, for safety, for representation among all the different segments of our community who really need to be a part of safety. Safety has to be something that is co-owned and shared, and our police department under Commissioner Michael Cox is really trying to live out every day, making the information available, being out in community, building the partnerships, learning and reflecting and iterating alongside our community members to how we can do even more every single day on how to stop, resolve, and ideally prevent all forms of violence in the city.
Jody, thank you. And Mayor, thank you. We only have a minute left, Mayor. Last night, Donald Trump won in a landslide in Iowa. Instead of going to New Hampshire like most candidates do, he went to a courtroom in New York City where he has already been found liable for sexual abuse against E. Jean Carroll. Today he's there on the first day of the trial for defaming her yet a second time. How worried are you? He's leading in virtually every poll in virtually every major state. We have a minute. How worried are you about the prospects come November?
We don't have a choice but to work as hard as we possibly can to try to explain what's at stake here. It's a moment in our political history, in our country's history, where it often feels like people are not talking to each other, and one set of information is just staying within a certain space and not even crossing over some of the interviews last night, for example, of why people are making their decisions. It's connected to a larger feeling of disillusionment and anxiety, and we know what happens. We know what is going to happen if it goes down that route. I'm going to be in New Hampshire on Saturday doing multiple events, rallying our volunteers from Boston and Massachusetts to try to help with a push there. We need people to talk to other people. It's not going to come from media headlines and changing people's minds through things that they read. It's only going to be from direct conversations. What is the experience? Under the Biden administration, we've gotten federal dollars to be able to transform so many aspects of what we do, from childcare to businesses to climate, and we need to make those connections much more visible and apparent to people.
Please join me in thanking Mayor Wu for once again being here for monthly Ask the Mayor. Mayor
Thank
Wu,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Wu, for
Appreciate
coming.
it.
We very much appreciate it. Coming up after the noon news, a local woman, our media maven, Sue O'Connell, we're going to talk to her about former President Trump's big win in Iowa, and teens spending a fortune on clothing and things like $62 Drunk Elephant moisturizer for 12-year-olds. What is this about? Our media maven will tell us. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Eastern Browdy. I am Marjorie Eakin. You are listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. This Friday and then next Monday and Tuesday of next week, we're going to be broadcasting up from Manchester, New Hampshire. But as Jim told me, you can. We're going to be on television here at the library. So if you happen to be here, you'll be able to see us up there in Manchester. And I hope then we'll be streaming on both YouTube and facebook.com/GBH News. Hey, Jim.
Excellent announcement, I should say. That was really good. Thank you. Joining us now on Zoom, because obviously she couldn't be bothered to come to the library, is local woman. I mean, I got to be honest.
She's had a trauma.
And medium, well, another coyote
Another
thing.
trauma.
We'll get to that in a minute. Is media maven Sue O'Connell, co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue, airing every Sunday at 11:30, following Meet the Press. And she hosts every night live editions of At Issue at 7:30 on NBC 10. And she'll be live from New Hampshire. Oh, we're going to see Sue in New Hampshire Sunday to Tuesday with a bonus episode. Thank you. And an episode, too, on Sunday. Hey there, Sue.
Hey there, Jim. Hi, Marjorie. How are you?
Good. So
we're
what's
good.
with the coyote?
Yeah. What happened now?
Jim, you remember Dana Bailey from NECN?
Oh, I love Dana Bailey. Yeah.
So Dana and I were talking yesterday morning because he's had some coyotes in his backyard.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
I told him he's got to get a whistle. You have to have a whistle with you at all times.
Sure.
And then we were joking about how the one time you don't have your whistle is the time you're going to meet a coyote. So I've been working at night, so I haven't been working in the morning. Took the dog for a late walk at 8:30 this morning.
Yeah.
Tons of traffic. I live a block from Columbus Avenue, and a coyote runs across the field and blocks me in again. And I didn't have my whistle.
Oh, my God.
So what do you think? I don't mean, this is going to sound accusatory, and I don't mean it to be that way.
Blaming the victim?
Other people do not have a story every day about being attacked by a coyote, and you do. So, and by the way, she sends us videos, so these are corroborated. This is not a fantasy attack. What is it about you or Maud? Maud would be the dog.
I think it's the same coyote, too, because it's big, and I keep having the same, oh, that's a German Shepherd. Then, no, it's not a German Shepherd.
It's a coyote.
I don't know if I'm just in its home. I think that's what it is. I think I just keep going to where it is. And, of course, Jim, the second thing I think after, oh, my gosh, I'm going to die is, oh, I have to document this for Jim.
Well, we're glad you're well, and I'd be scared out of my you-know-why.
Yeah, they are scary. They are scary.
Well, I'm now just yelling at it and running at it, and it turns around. So I don't feel that much in danger, but, you know, it does break my morning meditation.
By the way, we're not supposed to mention this, but next pledge at GBH, we will have Jim and Marjorie whistles. GBH
Coyote whistles
emblazoned with the GBH logo. We'll give you one.
So we're going to talk about talk with Steve Kerrigan, the head of the Democratic Party here in Massachusetts, about Trump. We're going to talk about Trump a little later in the show. But since you are a political expert, Sue, and you're going to be up there in New Hampshire this weekend, what's your takeaway from Iowa last night?
Yeah, you know, Iowa is such an interesting, kind of crazy thing in general, and the weather certainly made it a little bit more difficult. But I think in the end, even though I think only about 115,000 people participated, it did end up matching the polls. So if we were in research sampling, we'd say it was a good sample of what people were thinking. I think that the Haley people got a little bit over their skis, thinking that maybe she could have a very strong second place finish. So they tried to back that up. Governor Sununu was on a lot of networks yesterday trying to back that up a little bit. I think overall what the setup here is, Trump is making this a race like no other. DeSantis has a big lift ahead of him. I know he's skipping New Hampshire kind of and going right to South Carolina. And Haley has to do really, really well in New Hampshire in order to propel into South Carolina. I was in New Hampshire yesterday. I was in Derry and Manchester, talking to people, and people are in for Trump 100%. They don't care what happens. And then a lot of people were undecided. And then more than usual, I think, for a primary in New Hampshire, weren't even really paying attention and had no plans to vote. So it's a very chaotic, Trump-like election season, and anyone who can tell they know what's going to happen is crazy.
You know, one last thing about Iowa before we leave it, and it's a subset, but it's a really sad one. I'm sure people have read about the principal of this Prairie High School where the kid was shot and killed the other day. The shooter allegedly killed himself. And sadly, the principal, this guy, Dan Marburger, who apparently was idolized by the kids and the parents, attempted to do what he could to prevent further carnage, I think successfully. And he died yesterday. And this almost is hard for me to say. Kim Reynolds, who is the governor there, does the mandatory, what a beloved figure he was, how horrible this is. And we did what we often do in those circumstances, and we Googled Kim Reynolds and sensible gun reform. And in 2022, she expanded the rights to own assault weapons in Iowa. The 400-year-old Senator Grassley from Iowa voted against the incredibly modest federal gun reform bill, I think, of last year. Joni Ernst, to her credit, the senator, did vote for it. It's just, you know, if you're going to do this and it's unconscionable and cruel, I almost think you should be precluded from talking when someone suffers a horrible loss, as this Marburger family did after the death of their father and husband.
Yeah, an avoidable loss, right?
Yeah.
Or a loss that could have been diminished, or a loss that could have been hindered, right?
Or less likely, right?
Yeah.
Likely, you know, I mean, that's the thing, you know, whenever I have conversations with people and they talk about how it seems there's an increase in stabbings and how dangerous that is. Well, that may be true, but it's a lot harder to stab 40 people than it is to shoot
exactly
40
right.
people in 2 minutes. So, yeah, I agree with you, Jim. The hypocrisy of allowing guns to get into people's hands that shouldn't have them, and then showing some mock sympathy for people who are, you know, on the ground trying to protect children is just unfathomable.
We're talking to Sue O'Connell.
You know, just one more thing about Iowa. There was a story in the Washington Post about this gay bar in Iowa.
Great story.
And it was talking about people who are in the gay bar who are gay or family members. It was talking about this terrible focus in a very odd way, I think, of Republicans on transgender stuff. You know, Nikki Haley linking a rise in teen girl suicide to transgender athletes. Absolutely no evidence of that. She's pushing that. Trump goes on and on about how he's going to keep men out of women's sports, as he puts it, quote unquote, men out of women's sports. They're talking about federal bans on gender-affirming care, telling parents that they can't get the medical care for their children that they feel that they need, and fights about trans people in the military. It goes on and on and on. I don't know. Does this play nationwide?
Well, you know, I had an epiphany yesterday, Marjorie, in Derry, where I was talking to a guy that was in about his 30s, and I was asking him about his support for Trump. And he went off on the whole, you know, I dare say he was a QAnon fan, but he went off on pedophilia and how dangerous it is and how pedophiles are everywhere and no one is doing anything about it. And it suddenly realized that linking a lot of these fears that these and not to diminish pedophilia and people who are victims of it, but when you package a bunch of stuff together and pitch it that this is the biggest danger to America, that's that paranoid point of view that I think many of the Republicans and certainly Trump are really connecting with. And by hyping up an idea that trans people, trans adults, drag queens, people who love to go to this bar, Blazing Saddles, of course, a great name for an Iowa gay bar.
Exactly.
You know, is that somehow they're an imminent current danger to you in your everyday life is what I think this bundling and this packaging is that the Republicans are doing. And Nikki Haley has this habit of just making up facts and making up data to support some fear that's out there. But as we talk about all the time, the danger of you, or as Wanda Sykes said, you know, if you're worried about drag queens, performing in libraries, let me know the next time a drag queen hits your kid with a book. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just an outrageous minimal fear that they exploit to bundle with other fears so that they can pitch this carnage in America idea.
You know, by the way, we knew about this. I'm so glad you brought up the Washington Post story. It isn't because it's something new to us. It's just they put a human face and talk about the fear that some of these trans people are living with. And, you know, you wonder when the Republican strategists are in a room figuring out what cultural issue is going to play, why can't they pick a constituency that is less vulnerable, that has suffered less, and decide to create a phony, I mean this sincerely, like, eliminate Christmas. Why don't you do that? I'm serious, rather than hurting people. By the way, did you see RuPaul last night?
Oh, excuse me.
His 8th straight Emmy for best whatever show, talking about drag queens
Jim,
in libraries. What?
What are you talking about?
What?
It's hurting everybody. We just talked the other day about the 15 states that turned down the money that could have helped poor children who are poor get money over the summer for school food.
I mean, it's not just trans people. They don't care who they're hurting.
They're hurting women.
Yeah.
I mean, we have story after story of women who are having ectopic pregnancies and are, getting septic infections, what can kill you, but they can't get abortion. So I think that the hurting is across the board. But I'm sorry,
But I
Sue.
think it's about finding a boogeyman that it doesn't really. I mean, in this bar, of course, you've got veterans, you've got people who have served our nation who happen to be gay or drag queens or trans, and they're afraid to, after serving their country, they're afraid to just go have a beer. It's crazy.
So, Sue, on a less screwed up note, or maybe it's a more screwed up note, I don't know, but this story also from the Washington Post about kids who are watching a lot of TikTok and a lot of Instagram, getting stuff like 40-ounce of Stanley tumblers for $90 and $110. Moisturizer.
Explain what a Stanley tumbler is for those who don't know.
A Stanley tumbler. This is not a Stanley tumbler. This is a hydro flask, but it kind of looks like a Stanley tumbler.
Does.
And I guess the Stanley tumblers are the very hip tumblers now that people have in all different colors, and they pay $90 and $200 and $250 for these. I was next to somebody actually in yoga class with a Stanley cup, and I said, "What is so great about it?" She said, "Well, actually, nothing. My mother was looking for something to get me for Christmas, and so she got me the Stanley cup." She said, "It's basically like any other cup. Maybe it keeps things a little bit colder, a little bit hotter." But the point of this story is that kids who spend so much time on TikTok now are seeing these really expensive things like this $68 face moisturizer. What do they call it? Drunk elephant face moisturizer. And they're spending their parents' hard-earned money, or they're going out and getting after-school jobs because these become in things. I mean, Air Jordans was quaint, I guess, 25 years ago compared to this.
Yeah, it's an amazing kind of marketing and historic thing that's happening with marketing to kids and young adults and teens right now. When we were kids, when I was a kid, you might have seen things in a magazine, you might have seen a celebrity wear something. If you saw a celebrity wear something, you had to find out for yourself how you could get it. We had the, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous TV show, but, that was sort of the influencer of the time. And now things are changing so quickly, right? So the Stanley tumbler right now, next year probably won't be in style. So you've got
No, that's right.
You got the quick changeover of things that are hot. You also have, this amazing amplification on TikTok and social media, the people pitching things. And then you've got the secondary market, right? So if you want a particular pair of Uggs, or a particular color of a Stanley tumbler, and you can't get it in the stores, there's a secondary market that you can go to get it. And instead of paying $60 for it, you're paying $250 for it. And then there's the collectible aspect of it, right? We all think that these water bottles are helping cut down on plastic, which they are, except if you have 50 of them, I don't really you're helping.
Yeah,
right?
and some of them are like $500.
Yeah.
I mean, people paying astronomical amounts.
Can I say how
money.
big this is? For those who think this is some side deal, Stanley tumbler is made by Stanley, like the tool company.
Right.
10 years ago, the revenues of Stanley were $75 million.
Yeah.
Do you know what they are now? $750 million.
Yeah, it's gone up.
10 times.
Yeah,
And
I
the
just wanna
president
say-
of it, what?
I just want to say it was on Ruby's Christmas list this year.
No,
a Stanley,
really?
And I said, my dad was a Teamster truck driver who had a Stanley thermos and a Stanley lunch pail. And I said, that Stanley? That's
Exactly. Well, as you say, it kind of goes in spurts, because the big thing for a while was Nalgene. Remember Nalgene's? I
Yeah,
used to have
sure.
one of those.
You
They
had
didn't
one of
have
those, didn't you?
BPAs or something
Yeah.
in them. Then it was the hydro flask. This is what that is. Then there's a Yeti, the Yeti, Y-E-T-Y. That was a big thing. Now it's Stanley. But the point of this story is that it's almost become like de rigueur, if you're 12 years old, 13 years old, you can take pictures of your Stanley tumblers or of your drunk elephant makeup, and then you put them on, you show them all to your friends, via TikTok or Instagram, whatever you're doing, and it eases these kids' anxiety, which I found really it does.
Well, in one way or another, Mark, we view it through the technology, which is right, but it's a lot like collecting baseball cards, or it's a lot like collecting sneakers. Or I think one of the challenges with this is that the line between being a teen or a tween and an adult has really shrunk. And there aren't a lot of stores. There was an article a couple of weeks ago. There aren't a lot of stores where teenagers and tweens can go shop. So now they're going to shop at Sephora, and now they're going to shop at sneaker stores. So many of the items that would have in the past been young adult items are now tween items, and they collect them, and they're doing the same thing they always do. It's just now just amplified and more expensive.
Why do you care about, assuming they're not stealing the money, why do you care about this?
Because if you have 2 or 3 kids that are 10, 12, and 14, and this is what their friends are all doing, I mean, it's a difficult place for parents to be. I mean,
how about you can have one Stanley tie? I just looked up on Amazon, $35. I don't know why they're reselling.
Well, it's different. There's different varieties of Stanley Cups. There's different colors of Stanley Cups. I guess that's why, because you could say, like you said before, you could get one pair of really nice sneakers, but there seems to be this epidemic because people spend 3 or 4 hours a day on TikTok, which is a lot of hours, of pressure on parents, and you can't, and sometimes you don't fit in. One of the reasons I liked uniforms for school is that everybody had to wear the same thing, and you could dress up your saddle shoes, or you could dress up your socks, but you weren't like dressing. You weren't. How they establish status by having some snazzy outfit. I guess that's why it bothers me, the pressure on the parents.
Thing I would underscore with Marjorie too, Jim, is it does kind of teach early wealth signaling, which I'm not a big fan of. Like I'm getting it, and I'm going to show you how many I have, so I can indicate what my class status is. And if you're not part of that class status, or if you're, for a while the North Faces, when my kid was
huge.
That was huge. Everyone had to have a North Face. Yep. And you had to have a color. And if your parent was like, no, you're not getting that. You're getting this from Kohl's. You felt bad about it, and it is. But again, that's always happened. But the wealth status signaling to me is the troubling part.
So we're talking to Sue O'Connell. By the way, an anonymous texter just texted in and said Sue might have fewer coyote encounters if she stopped wearing Lady Gaga's meat dress, which I think is actually a very good point. Before you go, Renee Graham wrote a great column.
Oh, yeah.
The title of which is called, sort of a variation on a theme, except for adults. Growing up shouldn't mean growing out of a love of play. And she starts her piece with this guy, Miles Turner, who plays for the Indiana Pacers, who is asked a question, I guess, by a reporter at some press event, and is asked about his playing with Legos. I love this quote. And Turner's response is, I build Legos. I don't play with Legos. And she talked about the joy she got. She did Legos too, right? A typewriter and something else. And I had a question, which Marjorie, I don't think was able to answer, is when you build a Lego thing, which apparently creates great satisfaction. There's that Lego thing over at Assembly, whatever
Square,
it's called, or whatever.
Legoland.
In Somerville, which is huge. What do you do with it? And I don't mean that as a joke. Do you disassemble it?
You display it.
You just wait a second. She's talking about making this and then that and then another thing.
You get
display
kits.
them all over your house.
You get kits,
I know
right?
you get kits.
You get a
and
typewriter
you display them all
kit.
over your house?
Well, the kid downstairs from me, I'm in a 2-family. He's a great Lego guy. He showed me like his super Darth Vader spaceship that he made. It was incredible.
Okay, go ahead, Sue.
Well, but puzzles. I mean, it's the same kind of thing with puzzles. You laminate them and put them up on a wall.
No,
and
you
frame
don't.
them.
Who laminates a damn puzzle? You make a jigsaw puzzle, you
Jim,
take it apart,
where have you
give
been?
it to somebody else.
Where have you been?
You laminate puzzles? I don't think so.
I don't do puzzles, but lamination is in.
How many laminated puzzles do you have in your house, Sue?
I don't have any, but I know people who do.
Yeah, that's right. You show them, they become paintings, Jim, for your wall, right?
You have your whistle with you or not?
I don't, so anything could happen.
Okay.
Okay, Sue, I'm really worried about you out there in the wilds of Roxbury with these coyotes on.
She doesn't appear to be shaken at all, though.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
I live in the city. I mean, this is the part that cracks me up. I live near Jackson Square in Jamaica Plain. I live near Avenue. you. I live in the city.
Yeah, well, you just never know. Those coyotes are everywhere. You got to
We're
be
losing-
careful. And you got to really be careful if they go back and get their buddies and they come back. You know, then you
When
got
does
3 or
that-
4
when does that
coyotes.
ever happen?
That's what they do down the Cape. They spot
they
you.
do.
You've
They
seen
spot
this?
you. They go
Wait,
back
you've
and get
seen
their
this?
friends. I have not seen it with my
Well,
own
how do you
eyes.
know this is true?
Because my friends have been.
What did they say to you?
Their dogs have been attacked by coyotes, and they get in
By a
par-
pack of coyotes.
By a pack of coyotes. That is correct.
And you never told
And there
me
was
that.
nothing but a little bit of hairball in the back.
Oh, that's
porch.
not true.
It's true. It
Wait,
was
the
terrible.
dog is dead?
The dog was killed.
By a pack of coyotes?
I think so. I don't know how many, but yeah.
What, you said you think so?
Well, the dog was definitely killed by a coyote. I don't know how many.
Oh, okay.
It was like, but that's what happened. So if you got one, that's bad enough.
Yeah.
But if they go back and get their buddies, it's all
Pack of
over.
them, yeah.
They'll take out you and Maud, so it would be a terrible thing.
Let me tell you, for whatever it's worth, it's a very strikingly sad story. I think Marjorie is making most of it up, so it's not reason. It's not.
It's true.
Oh, I think you are. I think you are.
Right down the street from
You
me.
just said I think this
Al
will happen.
Johnson's backyard.
It is Al
right
Johnson's
across the
backyard?
street from the late great Al Johnson's
Well, that's
backyard.
great. He
Laid
was
across the
fabulous.
street. Little
Okay,
mop
Sue,
of dog was
I don't
all
think
gone.
you have to be part of this. Goodbye. We'll
Thank
see
you
you
very
in New
much.
Hampshire. We're looking forward to it. Sue O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Sue O'Connell. We've been speaking with local
Coyote
woman
woman.
and Coyote Crusader, Sue O'Connell. She's co-host of NBC 10 Boston's At Issue, which you can see every Sunday at 11:30 following Meet the Press, which is on Channel 10 around here on most stations. And she hosts every night live editions of At Issue at 7:30, also on NBC 10. And Sue O'Connell's going to be live from New Hampshire on Sunday through Tuesday. I'm sure we'll see her up there with a bonus episode on Sunday. Coming up, NBC Sports Boston, Trenny Casey is here. I guess you can't guess what she might be talking about. Maybe something about the New England Patriots. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the library. We're streaming. I'm sorry, which is the one that's not working again?
Facebook.
We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It'll be working sometime soon. We'll be in Manchester, New Hampshire, as we've said repeatedly. Friday of this week, Monday and Tuesday of next week. Tuesday's the primary. Broadcasting live from Manchester, and you can watch us either on YouTube or Facebook, which will be working by then, or come to the library. It's going to be on the screens here, or you can listen on 89.7, et cetera, et cetera. We're joined now by Trenny Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and a BPR contributor. Hello, Trenny.
Morning, guys. Or
Right
afternoon. I'm here in the
Whatever
afternoon
it
this
is.
week.
Yeah,
Nice
you
to
are
see
here
you.
in the afternoon. Thank you for coming in the afternoon. So everybody knows Bill Belichick is no longer with the New England Patriots.
not?
No, he's not.
Oh, okay.
And he spoke during a press conference last week announcing that he was going. Here is a little bit of Bill Belichick in his Parting the Ways press conference.
Hi, good morning. Seen this many cameras since we signed Tebow. At this time, we're gonna move on, and I look forward, excited for the future. But always very, very appreciative of the opportunity here, the support here, and what you've done for me. Thank you.
And that was it.
Well, wasn't it?
Well, it
But
wasn't,
was a little
and
bit more, but it wasn't much.
Yeah, he did go on. So we were told that there was going to be a mutual press conference at noon. And then maybe a half hour before that press conference took place, we were told it was going to be a mutual reading of statements at noon. And then Robert Kraft would take questions at 2 o'clock, which is what happened. I mean, listen, like mutual parting of ways, Robert Kraft must have said it 15 different times. Was it really mutual? I don't know that it was really mutual. I think it was that the Krafts, Robert and Jonathan, took a look at the way things had gone, and Robert talked about this more in depth at the 2 o'clock press conference where he actually took questions. That they felt that there were not as many checks and balances, not enough Dr. No's, as Kraft called them, people that sort of said to Bill, like, no, this is not the right way to do it. The result was a 4-13 season, but he also pointed that it wasn't just the 4-13 season. It's what we've been talking about on here for a couple of years. That really had been 3 of the last 4 years have been abject disasters. They just have not been good football. The organization was not going in the right direction, so they agreed to mutually part ways. From what we understand, Belichick would have liked to have stayed. He would have been happy to stay. But that the Krafts were ready to move on.
Speaking of the Krafts, so he does the press conference. We'll get back to Belichick in a minute and his replacement in a minute, Jerod Mayo. Kraft did hold that press conference later in the day, and here's some sound of Robert Kraft, on the influence Belichick had over the franchise during his time as head coach.
Bill had control over every decision, every coach we hire, the organization reports to him on the draft and how much money we spend or every decision has been his, and we've always supported him.
By the way, so in the dictionary where it says the expression throwing under the bus, I believe there's a picture of Robert Kraft at that press conference.
Like hurling Bill Belichick under the bus?
It's sort of, I mean, that was what that, am I reading too much into that? It's basically saying we've been a disaster the last 3.5 years, and we're a disaster not because of me, because of this guy.
Well, and I think that his actions since mutually parting ways with Bill Belichick have also indicated that.
Like what?
I was honestly under the impression, or I guess I just assumed, and we know what happens when you assume, that they would do a broader search for a head coach. But instead, they went out, and so at that same press conference, Robert Kraft was asked how quickly they would act to, hire a new head coach, hire a general manager. He said everything's going to happen very quickly. Well, I'm in line Friday morning. This was a Thursday that Bill Belichick that they did this. On Friday morning, I'm in line getting a breakfast and a coffee with some friends after a workout class, and it pops up on my phone at like 8:15. Jerod Mayo, new head coach of the New England Patriots. I'm like, are you kidding me? It hasn't been 24 hours.
Yeah.
So and we found out that they didn't have to go through an interview process with Jerod because they had written into his contract a succession plan. So now you're going with a guy who was a Patriot. He was drafted in the first round by the Patriots. He was an all-defensive rookie of the year for the Patriots, and his only coaching job has been with the Patriots and under Bill Belichick. So you don't go really in a different, and don't get me wrong, Jerod is a very different person than Bill Belichick, but everything he learned was under one guy. And then I assumed, okay, well, all right, well, you're going to keep Jerod around, but you're clearly going to make some changes then at the general manager position, in the personnel department. And now Phil Perry, who I work with at NBC Sports Boston, reported over the weekend that they're not going to interview anybody for those positions either. It's going to be Matt Groh, who has worked under Bill Belichick, and Elliot Wolf, who at least has been somewhere else. Elliot Wolf's father was Ron Wolf, Hall of Fame general manager for the Green Bay Packers. Elliot worked for the Packers and now works for the Patriots. So at least you have like a little bit of a different perspective. Now we are hearing that they're going to have more open interview process for the offensive coordinators, so maybe they won't. But we're also hearing that Bill O'Brien and Josh McDaniels could be in the running for those two jobs. So it's basically like, Bill, this was all your fault. We're going to run it back with all the guys that you trained, which I personally don't think is the right way to go about it.
So it seems to me, though, if one is to believe that at least, well, not what one is to believe, at least their perception, based upon what we just played on the part of the Krafts, is Bill Belichick had control of everything, absolutely everything. What we're now doing is we're taking back total control. We're taking a relatively inexperienced coach who obviously will have to defer to us more. We're going to promote to general manager insiders who will have to defer to us as they always have. I mean, I'm not even faulting. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, but it's a control thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that not what they're doing?
I mean, maybe. I guess the only reason I would maybe push back on that is when Robert was asked about what he didn't like on the field, he was very quick to say, I'm not the smart. That's not my expertise. My expertise is running the business, not looking at what's happening on the field. So I don't know if we're going to see like a lot of people, and I don't know if you read the Seth Wickersham story I sent you guys. It was kind of long. And Seth Wickersham in that article suggests what you're suggesting, that he's hearing from the inside that the Krafts want to be, that Jonathan and Robert and Jonathan want to be more like Jerry Jones and his son Stephen Jones, Dallas Cowboys owner and his son. And like Jerry Jones has his hands in everything. The guys who I know, Tommy Curran, Phil Perry, who cover the Patriots a lot, they don't necessarily think that's the direction it's going. That it's more that they want to, that they're taking this time to figure out, they like these guys, right? They like Jerod Mayo, they like Matt Grove, they like Elliott Wolf, and they want to see if they can do the job. But the question I asked yesterday on my show, and neither of our two football insiders had an answer for it, was, but what if it fails? Like, what if these guys can't do the job? And what if they were as much of a part of the problem as Bill Belichick was? And now you're going to spend another year in a crucial draft where you have the number 3 overall pick, where you've got some guys who, I really like them as people. And their answer was, well, they know what they can do. They've seen what they can do inside. And my argument back was, do we really like what they've done personnel-wise the last couple of years?
By the way, we should say Jerod Mayo is the first black coach in the history of the Patriots.
Yes, and he was the team captain at 23, which says he's got some leadership skills.
Listen, he is a wonderful human and is going to make he really is.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
But here's my question, though. For everything I've been reading and hearing and talking to you about, the issue about Belichick is that he was drafting the wrong people and putting the wrong people on the field and not giving Brady the protection and then not doing what he should have done for Matt Jones, whether you think he's great or not great, although I thought that game last night with Buffalo and
Josh Allen.
Yeah, Josh Allen, and boy, they looked those quarterbacks looked a lot different than Mac Jones. And how about that snow? They're shoveling the 5 feet of snow and stuff off the stands. But in any case, they weren't putting the right people around him. And from what Kraft said, it sounded like Belichick was making all those decisions, and what other people thought didn't really matter. So maybe that was the problem. He got some hubris as a super-duper coach and thought, I know best, when he didn't know best, at least in that one area.
And that's, I think, where the Kraft's line of thinking is that, and listen, we're not in those rooms. So maybe Matt Groh and Elliott Wolf were like, no, don't draft Mac Jones. Draft this guy instead. Don't trade back into the second round in 2020 and take Kyle Duggar. Let's stay where we are and take Jordan Love, who is now leading the Green Bay Packers, just crush the Cowboys on Sunday. Like, no, don't take N'Keal Harry. Take this receiver. Like, they've made some pretty. We don't know, and the Krafts hopefully do know, and maybe these guys were picking the right people. But that would be my trepidation as a member of the media. People who are fans, I think, have this concern. It's like, well, yeah, Belichick had the final say, but this is the group of people who gave him the options to choose from. Maybe he just frankly chose the wrong options, but they were still options.
And one last other question, too. How successful have owners been in running the show, like you said, about goes on in Dallas? I suspect that
Dallas hasn't won a Super Bowl since 1995.
Yeah, because I suspect they don't really. It's like when Jeff Bezos took over the Washington Post. The great thing, we talked about this on the show, is that Jeff Bezos said, I don't know how to run a newspaper, you run the newspaper.
Yeah.
And had some ideas about things.
We talked about Marty Barron told us that, who was the guy who ran the newspaper,
and in his book, he talked about that too, which is the wise thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
So you wonder whether.
Well, and I think we'll find out, right? Like, I think right now, and not to discredit Seth Wickersham and Wright Thompson. He's ESPN and Wright Thompson, who put together this really long piece that suggests. I mean, this was a pretty, salacious may not be the right word, but it was an article that dug deep into the dissolution, the dissolving of the relationship between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. And in that article, it is presented that the Krafts wanted more power, that they didn't like the amount of power that they had. But again, if you talk to people who cover the team in town day in and day out, they say the part about Bill Belichick having too much power and not listening to enough people, that is right, but that the Krafts trying to grab power is not necessarily right. So
who's in charge? Which Kraft is running the show, by the way? Do we know?
I think it's still Robert Kraft who's really in charge. from what I understand, at some point, I mean, Robert Kraft's what, 82, 83 years old? Like I think there's probably a slight shift happening where Jonathan at some point will take fuller control. But I mean, Robert Kraft is still, I mean, he's 82, but he certainly doesn't seem it. He's still, certainly his faculties are all there. So I think he'll continue. I think he loves the organization, will continue to run it as long as he can. I think the bigger question is, who's running the Patriots? Like, who's going to make the decisions, be the end-all, be-all? Because if you kind of have this triangle of Matt Groh, Elliot Wolf, and Jerod Mayo, what keeps those three? If there isn't one person who said, you're the final say in this, what keeps them from just arguing all the time and them trying to claw and backstab for power? Like, to me, there has to be a clear hierarchy, or I fear that you're just going to end up where you did this year, which is a lot of infighting and backstabbing in a toxic culture.
I hope so. Now,
it's certainly more interesting for us, Jim, when it's like that.
By the way, since we often criticize Tom Brady, not his skill on the field,
he
but
was
off the
very
field,
gracious.
he did this
Yes.
really beautiful Instagram thing saying greatest coach of all. And whether he means it or not, it sounded legit, which is sort of nice. Can we get to a much more important issue related to this?
Sure.
I love Patrick Mahomes. I love watching Patrick
Even
Mahomes.
his commercials are
arguably the greatest quarterback now and one of the handful of greatest quarterbacks ever for the Kansas City Chiefs. I made a principled decision. I can afford to subscribe to Peacock for a month for $2.99 or whatever. But since the NFL makes about $16 trillion a year.
You opted not to.
I opted not to. And I sort of screwed myself because I didn't get to watch him play. And I hear he was pretty great. Well, I read that he was pretty great. Is this the future?
Jim, I didn't watch it either.
For the same reason?
Do you want to know why? Because we went to dinner.
We went to
Good for you.
No, hold on. We went to dinner, and they didn't have it at dinner. But we were home by halftime, and I went to put it on because I work for NBC, but I forgot we had gotten like this option to opt in to Premium Peacock over the summer, and I guess I forgot. And it said I had to pay $2.99. I can pay $2.99 out of principle. I was like, what?
You did it too?
I'm like, I'm not giving the NFL $2.99. I'm like, I work for this company. I'm not doing it.
But is this the future?
This is the future. And at some point, I mean, everyone is just, and listen, it worked for NBC. They had a ton, I think like 38 million people. There was like a
We're
ridiculous.
on Peacock that night?
I think. I might check my numbers on that. That might be really off.
Someone
But I know
will
it was
check
like a lot. There were a lot of people. There were a ton of eyeballs on that game because it was Patrick Mahomes, it was the Miami Dolphins, and it was Taylor Swift again. So even if you're like, depending on what angle you want to watch the game, it was a highly successful model. And the Amazon games have been working as well. Like people watch the games on Amazon Prime. Now everybody has Amazon Prime.
There must be some package that includes Peacock because I don't know how. I don't sign up for Peacock.
You watched the game?
I did.
Oh.
You did?
Yeah, but I don't know how I.
Marjorie,
Wait,
I
you
know
watched
you
it at
pretty
your
well.
house?
I would say the odds of you unintentionally signing up for Peacock
Are pretty good?
Are pretty good.
Yeah.
You know
Like
what I
if any of
mean?
you looked at your cable bill, you probably have like a
Didn't know.
$2.99
Yeah.
monthly
By the way,
charge.
speaking
Didn't
of
know I
Taylor
had
Swift, the video
Peacock.
that I saw on Twitter,
When she was dancing back
when
and
they're
forth.
the whole suite, is that real or?
That's true. It's okay. So
Don't tell me it's AI.
it's not AI. It was real. But there's a thing I didn't know what it's called. It's called the swag and sway. There's like, okay, this is when you know I'm like in my late 40s. I was like, what is the swaggy sway? Apparently there's a hip hop song that came out a few years ago, and then one of the players on the Kansas City Chiefs in a late season game like passed a note to the PA guy and was like, play this song, and the whole stadium started to sway. And then they played it again because they were up big, and then they caught video of Taylor and Travis Kelce's mom and the entire box, Patrick Mahomes'
It was
wife.
like violence.
Yeah,
swaying.
they're all
It
in there.
was
It's like
great.
it's like this dance where everybody just sways, and you're supposed to
Great.
sway like opposite. I don't really understand. I'm too
They
old
were
to
having
understand.
a lot of fun,
But they
it
were
looked
having
like
fun,
to
and what I
me.
didn't
I
like,
loved it.
I loved it too, and people were taking like. Apparently it started where like a MAGA guy reposted it and said it was annoying. And my whole thing with that is if she would have sat there when everyone else was doing it and didn't participate, you would say that she acts like she's too good for
Exactly.
everybody
Right.
and she's too uppity. And then she does it and you make fun of her. The poor girl can't do anything right. So just leave her alone and let her enjoy her.
If you haven't seen the video,
her
you should
boyfriend. It's
Google
funny,
it.
yeah,
It's
it's great.
really
Do you know
fun.
she also gave her scarf to a woman was freezing out in the cold, and of course she's in a heated box, and she slides open the window. She sees this woman whose cheeks are all red, and she gives her scarf, and the woman wraps it around, and she took a selfie with her friend who she was at the game with, and Taylor Swift and Brittany Mahomes, and she went on the Today Show and stuff, and she was telling him she offered to give her the scarf back, and Taylor was like, just keep it. And then it was a whole thing about how it was a white scarf, not a red scarf, because red scarf is all about the big Taylor Swift song.
She is going to So can we stay with a bigger question for a minute? I mean, in the sports radio, and I don't know, sports media, it's fashionable to decide if Kraft is a bad guy. It's fashionable now to decide if John Henry's a bad guy because they're not buying players. I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia where we won nothing for years and years and years, and to move to a place where one team wins 6 championships, the Patriots and the Red Sox win 4 under John Henry and under Kraft, my attitude is give them
give them more leeway.
Give them a little bit. Having said that, it does appear that the Red Sox are not spending any money on anything.
Well, no. But the Celtics, we can all be watching the Celtics.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Great.
Well, but they haven't won any championships in like 10
this
plus
is the
years.
year.
No, they've not won a championship since 2008.
Okay, so
I think this is the year.
So what's the thinking with the Red Sox when all these great players are signing with other teams?
I don't know. They don't want to hit the luxury tax. I personally think it's that it's just not a priority for them anymore. That they won those 4 titles, and John Henry looks at it and says, I make a ton of money without putting a good team on the field, because if you go to Fenway in the summer, it doesn't get, as the year rolls on and it becomes less of a tour. In the summer, it's a tourist attraction. So if you go to go to a summer Yankees game, it's packed. It's packed, but it's also packed with Yankees fans and Royals fans and they're not the Indians, Guardians fans and Brewers fans, because it's not hard to get a ticket anymore. So as long as they're putting butts in the seats, and as long as you're selling out for the Guns N' Roses Lita Ford concert, and you're selling out for Noah Khan is playing there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Noah Khan. He's a Vermont guy. You know, he sold out 2 shows. Like, Zach Brown Band goes there and plays this big concert. Like, you're still making money hand over fist. And so they're investing it in other places. I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but they actually, Fenway Sports Group has now invested in the Pittsburgh, so they own the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, a hockey team in Pittsburgh, as well as, why can I not think of the soccer team?
A premium soccer team in Europe.
In London.
UK.
Why am I
won the championship.
And they won
Liverpool.
Liverpool. I was like, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
So they own Liverpool. They want to buy an NBA team. They're investing. Fenway Sports Group wants to invest in the PGA. So they are diversifying their portfolio. But that's where the money's going. So they also, in addition to acquiring the Pittsburgh Penguins, this year they also acquired their regional broadcaster. So now,
what does that mean?
So Nesson, okay, so we all know that Fenway Sports Group owns and operates Nesson, right? So
which broadcasts the Red Sox.
Which broadcasts the Red Sox and the Bruins.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh, when I worked there, it was Fox Sports Net Pittsburgh. And we had the Penguins and the Pirates. They had broadcast deals with those 2 teams. And they've changed hands as a regional sports network year after year after year. And they recently were part of that Diamond Valley Sports Group that's going bankrupt. And it really is shaking up the regional sports landscape. Nesson went in, or not Nesson, Fenway Sports Group went in. They now own them. And so they moved some pieces around. Like a guy I know who's been there for a long time no longer has a job there anymore. My friend who was the Penguins sideline reporter is now the in-studio host, and they've hired this young woman to be their sideline reporter. They've shaken up the Pirates broadcast. So their attention is spread. Their tentacles are spread wide everywhere else. They're also in business with LeBron James and his production company. So to me, the Red Sox have just, even though they used to be a premier franchise in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, they are no longer a priority for the Henrys or Fenway Sports Group. And I think then you should just sell them, because it's not like you own just some random sports group. Like the Boston Red Sox are a legacy baseball franchise.
Yeah.
And I know that you won, and no one is saying that they're ungrateful for what that team accomplished under the Henrys' ownership, but it is so obvious to anyone right now that is a sports fan that they just don't care about winning there anymore. All they care about is making money and not having to pay the luxury tax.
I'm not questioning your wisdom in this. I just.
Well, you don't
when
care that much
live-
either because you're a
No,
Wouldn't it be a
fan,
drag,
right?
though? Wouldn't it be a drag to be John Henry and to be losing all summer in Fenway and have everybody
Also, you live
looking
here.
At,
I mean, that's why I don't
Yeah.
buy it. If he lived in, I mean, the guy lives here. He knows the joy of winning a championship in your hometown.
But it costs
own
you. But
the
it costs you money to win a championship.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
You know.
I hope you're wrong.
You
but-
know what he likes more?
What?
The joy of buying another house on a Nantucket compound or another plane to fly. You know, him and his family around. Like, I'm pretty sour. I'm pretty sour on them right now.
Well, can I tell you,
let's
I mean to say one thing without
What?
Marjorie getting aggravated. We have seen John Henry during a baseball game. And I have to say, I think he cares a lot about winning those games.
When's
Do you
the
not?
last time
That
you
was a
saw?
long time
When's
ago.
the
Wasn't
last?
that long ago? It was a couple of years ago.
When's the last time you saw him at baseball? When's the last time he took questions from media? So
Well, I
this,
don't know about that.
last year, they did a town hall at their winter
Oh, I read
weekend,
about
which is
that.
coming up.
And they got booed or
and they got
something?
booed, and they're not doing it this year
Well, I
because they
wouldn't
didn't
do it
do
if I
it
got
because
booed
they
last
didn't. But they didn't make any moves again this year.
Okay,
the
fine.
fans want to know, Jim, if
Yeah.
that was when you needed to be pulled out of the seat at Fenway with Pam cooking oil.
No, that
Like,
was.
did you get stuck?
By the way, just very briefly,
Wait,
that
you
was
got
a story.
stuck at a seat
No,
at
no, no.
Fenway?
This story is worth telling. No, this-
Seventh inning stretch,
this is
Jim
worth
couldn't get
telling.
up. He
we
was
were
stuck.
when the Red Sox were in the playoffs, and it may have been the year they won the World Series for the first time. It was a long time ago.
2004.
Was Marty and I are on the radio, and we are saying we're the only media people who were not at the Red Sox game.
That's right.
And we were. And
We
Bob
were.
Sheridan, who was then head of SBLI,
Big insurance company.
calls us right after the show and says, I am going to rain pity on the two of you. It's pathetic that you're the only media people. He gave us his box seats.
He did.
And we went to the next game.
It wasn't a big enough box.
And it is true, it wasn't a box. He gave us box seats, but they're not a box. And it happens to be true, I could not get out of the seat for the seventh inning stretch. So while the truth is, I ultimately squirmed out of the seat to stand up. Marjorie has sort of bastardized the story into I had to use Pam to spray on the
Maybe
seat.
it was Crisco.
It was,
WD-40.
it was not easy squeezing out of the seat,
Jimmy,
but I did get out of it.
Okay.
In their defense, the seats there are
Thank you.
tiny.
They're
You're
small.
a
They're
sweet
small.
person.
Okay, we almost got to go. I'm getting criticized when I mentioned the Bruins. Okay, the Bruins are great too. But the Celtics, I mean, this could be the year for the Celtics.
I really think
They've got
that-
such a great, young, talented team.
I think they could be, and the additions they made in the offseason of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis are really paying
I
dividends.
love watching Holiday play.
I like watching him too. I really like watching Kristaps Porzingis, and I think everyone's
7'3",
fear
right?
7'3". He's so smooth, and he
Yeah.
can shoot from outside. He can shoot inside. He can set a pick and roll. He's a guy who can like set up the rest of the offense. He really stretches the floor. So it's been real. They're fun to watch. You can watch them. They're on NBC Sports Boston tomorrow night again. So yeah, watch those Celtics.
We always watch
great
the Celtics.
players.
We love the Celtics.
How many Bruins games have you watched lately?
I must admit, I don't watch the Bruins
You
as
don't
much
watch
as
the
I
Bruins.
should.
Okay.
I watch the Celtics more too. It's hard. There's a lot of sports on this time
Oh
of
my
year.
God. And
Do you
the-
guys know who you need to watch Saturday at 8:15?
Saturday at 8:15?
Go Pack, go!
Oh, but how great was that game, by the way?
It was. I'm so happy.
Her hometown
the Green
team,
Bay
the Green Bay
Packers.
Packers.
I'm
Oh,
from,
yeah.
I'm from
Her
Wisconsin,
hometown
so I'm a huge Packers fan.
Yeah.
And Jordan Love is just such a fun player to watch.
This
and
was
they,
the backup to Aaron Rodgers.
Yep, for
no one
3
knew if he
years.
was good enough, and the guy was unbelievable.
Yeah, they had slow start. They were under 500 to start, but they have just kind of hit a stride.
You ever been a game at Green Bay Packers?
Have I ever been to a
Okay, sorry. What's it like there? By the way,
It's
the fans
unbelievable.
own the team.
It's unbelievable. Because, yeah, the fans own the team, and you go in, and it's in this neighborhood. So it's just like this stadium that would be plopped like in the middle of like, I don't know,
Like Fenway
like
Park.
Fenway Park,
like
exactly.
like Fenway, but more rural.
Okay,
Like
okay.
it's more houses and everybody's house. We went to a house party that was there, and it's right. You can still look. It's just so. If you have a chance to go, if
It's great.
you're a sports fan, it is like a place that you go just to experience it.
That's
Although
fabulous.
people say, "Oh, go in December when it's really cold," I say that's dumb. Go in September, or October when the weather is
You know, these
beautiful.
poor people. What I couldn't
Yeah.
believe in some of these games that they had to postpone because the snow was so bad
yeah.
and the cold was so bad. And you guys out there with no
They gotta
sleeves
show
on.
they're tough, Marjorie.
Yeah,
They're manly.
I guess so. They all had their hands down their pants. So did you see that? Trying to warm up their
Excuse
hands.
me?
They
I don't
did
want-
because their hands were so cold.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because it was cold. That's
I didn't say that.
Whatever.
The water was cold, Jerry. The water was cold.
Trenny, it's great to see you.
Trenny Casey,
Thanks
thank
so
you very much.
Appreciate
Trenny
it.
Casey is an anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a Wisconsin girl, so we'll root for the Packers for Trenny, who's also a BPR contributor. Thank you very much, Trenny Casey. Coming up, Steve Kerrigan, chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. We're going to talk to him. We get criticized for not talking enough about what Joe Biden has done and achieved in his time in the White House. We're going to talk about that with Steve Kerrigan, as well as, of course, what happened in Iowa. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live from the library, streaming at Facebook. No, we're not. Where are we not? I'm sorry.
We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Just today for
Facebook
us.
is down. It's going to be back on Friday. We hope.
Okay, and on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, we're in Manchester,
That's
New Hampshire for the Democratic primary. Speaking of it, with all the focus coming out of Iowa being on the Republicans, there's actually an incumbent Democratic president also running for re-election. That'd be Joe Biden. A caller the other day criticized us, I think correctly, probably me more than Marjorie, for focusing too much on the horse race and not about enough on the policy. So we're joined now by Steve Kerrigan. Steve is the chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, and he's here to talk about why he believes that Joe Biden merits re-election on the merits as opposed to because Trump is atrocious and a threat to democracy. Steve, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Jim.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Marjorie.
Nice to see you, too. Well, I said before we went on the air that, I'm having about 19 nervous breakdowns. We have a lot of Trump people that love the fact that I'm having a nervous breakdown. They want
that's
to
nice.
They want to see
They're
me
entitled.
just
That's so
fall, be a puddle on the floor like Jell-O. Look at these headlines. Why Joe Biden polls terribly among young voters. The most durable force in American politics, Trump, and his tie to his voters. So I want you to tell me about what Joe Biden has done and why people who have turned away should give him a second look.
Sure. So for bizarre inter-Massachusetts Democratic Party politics and rules, I am saying these things as Steve Kerrigan, a really good Democrat, not the person who runs a party that happens to have 3 people on the ballot for the Democratic nomination. Joe Biden has been the most consequential president of anyone's lifetime within earshot of this radio show. He has done more for the economy since FDR, more for roads and bridges and infrastructure since Eisenhower, more on judges since Kennedy, more on healthcare almost and probably since Johnson did Medicare and Medicaid. He has transformed, and by the way, with all that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the infrastructure bill, they did that without one Republican vote. And now you're starting to see the impact here in Massachusetts. You're starting to see it all across the country. But in Massachusetts alone, 340,000 people got new jobs in the last this Biden administration, bringing our unemployment rate here to 2.9%. Unemployment around the country, by the way, is the lowest it's been in more than 50 years. Since before a man stepped on the moon, we have not had unemployment rates as sustained as this.
The stock market is through the roof.
But
let's talk about the economy because obviously you hear this all the time. People don't feel it. My theory is because they can't afford an apartment, they can't afford a house, they can't afford child care, and they can't afford health care.
So I definitely get that. And there are more people right now in the United States of America who more jobs available right now in the United States of America than people looking for jobs. We see it right here in Massachusetts. With one of my other hats, I run a health center out in Central Mass and Metro West, and we're constantly looking to recruit new healthcare workers. But you see it across the spectrum. And you're right, the issue of affordability and opportunity and competitiveness as a Commonwealth is a huge thing, which, by the way, I know we're not here talking about Governor Healy, but Governor Healy has done a fantastic job of centering those things in her administration.
By the way, Steve Kerrigan just used the exact same words that Maura Healey uses. I just want to say, you're doing a great service.
Centering? Is that
competitiveness, affordability, whatever.
Well, it is a crucial, and today even, and we'll get back to the president in a second, today even she announced something that I was talking about years ago, and she was as well, about affordability of child care and early childhood education. For every dollar we invest in early childhood education, it saves the Commonwealth $7 over the lifetime of that person.
But can we stay on the economy for a second? It is true inflation has come down. It is true unemployment is at record levels. The vast majority of people either don't believe it or won't accept it. And I think the reason is another critical piece of being a good president is being a good communicator. And I think he's a pretty atrocious communicator. And do you disagree with that?
I do think that the White House is spending an awful lot of time getting things done. It would be great if there was a fraction of them who spent a little bit more time talking about how.
I mean, but that is. I mean, and I don't mean this is. It's not just so that they say, so the voter says, "Oh, now I believe you're doing a good job. I'm going to vote for you," as opposed to the alternative. It's also about an anxiety thing. I mean, when people, you know this very well. Consider you worked for Ted Kennedy, you worked for Obama, you've worked for some of the greats in this party. When people have anxiety over these things, it's not just the inability to afford that apartment or gas, it's the anxiety that goes with it. And part of the purpose, it seems to me, of a leader, whether it's a Healy or a Wu or a president of the United States, is to allay some of those fears around things like the economy. And he hasn't done a wonderful job, and his team hasn't done a wonderful job.
Yeah, and there's more work to do, and we luckily have time to do it between now and Election Day in November. But last night showed us very clearly Donald Trump's got a grip on the Republican nomination. It's not going to get broken by any candidate or any primary. And so I firmly believe that as people start voting, voters are going to start paying attention because the decision is much more imminent for them. So they're going to do the research. They're going to figure out whether or not this is no longer a theoretical between Joe Biden in another term and Donald Trump in another term. It's a real thing. So yes, we need to do a better job, and I'll own that as part of the Democratic Party as well, of convincing voters that the Democratic Party and President Biden are best for them. But I think the voters themselves are going to see now that we are faced with a very real, no longer theoretical choice between the two.
Well, let's talk about an issue that probably is at the top of Marjorie's list, in which there is arguably the greatest differential: climate issues. Donald Trump is a climate denier. It's not but he would acknowledge that he's a climate denier.
He won't deny he's a denier.
Exactly. And you're the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is responsible for the largest investment in addressing climate change in the history of the world, I think, in the Inflation Reduction Act. However, what he did at the same time was he broke a campaign pledge about not drilling in certain areas with the Willow Project up there in Alaska. And when you read interviews of young people who, for the most part, have climate #1 on their list, they don't cite the $400 to $500 billion investment. They cite the easier to remember and, I'd say, troubling. We had Ed Markey on, who's troubled by it, obviously a big supporter of the president. The Willow thing, how do you talk about him and climate in general, and then the Willow thing in particular?
I mean, you said it better than I would, that he has been the most transformative president for climate in the history of the world. Probably the most transformative elected leader on climate in the history of the world. I would encourage, and I've talked to a lot of young people about this, college students here in Massachusetts and around the country, who are frustrated and share that frustration about whether it's Willow or just not doing enough, in their words, on climate. Not to be trite, I would sort of borrow a phrase that the president uses often, which is "Don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative." And I think
it's a good line. You should keep using it.
I mean, and that's really what it comes down to. And I think that's incumbent on us as leaders in civil society to talk to voters of all ages about their responsibility as a voter, which isn't to necessarily, I mean, look, it's your vote. It's a sacred right as an American to cast your ballot for whomever you wish. But I would encourage folks to look at the totality of what each candidate has to offer, and weigh them with your visions. No one, unless you yourself put your name on a ballot, no one is going to share 100% of your own thoughts and your own positions. And so it's your job as a voter. And I challenge folks, now that we know for a fact, for probably an indisputed assumption that Donald Trump's going to be the nominee, every voter has a responsibility to everyone else in their community in this country to do the research and frankly make the decision themselves. Joe Biden is not perfect. He's the first person to tell you he's not perfect, but I'll tell you, I like his imperfections a lot more than I like the other.
We're talking to Steve Kerrigan, who is the chair of the state Democratic Party in Massachusetts.
Okay, we have a couple of texts here. One says, the reason unemployment is down is because all the spouses that used to be able to stay home have to go to work now to pay for the high prices. Frankly, I think that's been true for a long time, at least in Massachusetts, but that's one. And another one says, been estimates Bidenomics is costing the average middle-class family $11,000 due to his crazy spending. I've not seen that number before.
I'd ask that texter to send in that
data.
But
I don't know where that comes from. But this texter claims that's why people loathe them.
By the way, on that front, just since we're talking about money, Joe Biden, his candidate, said, "I will not raise taxes on anybody making less than $400,000 a year,"
and he has
not.
He's raised taxes on corporations.
No,
he's the first president in decades who has taken the step to raise.
And Trump gave massive tax cuts to wealthy people and corporations. Yeah. But the thing is, when you read these things, as Jim said, from young people mad about Willow or they're mad about Gaza and Israel now, you do have to say to yourself, but what is the alternative? And the alternative is Trump. So that's why it seems to me that unless people don't care about climate change, don't care about abortion, which I think is going to be huge, I don't get how they could, unless they're in that cult.
So I would say, Gen Z is the largest voting bloc in the history of humankind, and will be. They were the ones who saved us from a red wave in 2022. There was a red wave. It just was for voters 45 and over.
Right.
Without Gen Z, there would have been a massive one. But they saved the country and the world from that. They are the first generation in a long time, not necessarily the vocal ones that we're hearing from now, but they, as a voting bloc, they vote based on issues, and they understand the connection between the issue and the politician. They understand that climate, gun issues, the economy, things like that, are real issues for them and growing up. I mean, they wake up worried about the fate of the world. You know, my generation worries about the creak in your shoulder and your general health. But this weighs on them heavily, which is why there's a significant increase in suicide rates among that generation. But they look at this stuff very, very seriously. I have faith in Gen Z that they will do the research and they will step up and understand that on, frankly, reproductive freedom. I mean, this is a man who runs around the country now, as much as he can run, telling everybody that he is very, very proud of overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
8 in 10 Americans support illegal access to abortion. And he has run around the country saying how proud he is at stopping that. That alone is going to help us win elections.
Well, you know what I wonder, too, is that some states have already had referendums on abortion, and those states that have had them, people have come out in favor of abortion rights. But I almost wonder...
Even in red states.
Kansas and Ohio.
Yes, that they're too soon, and that it would be better if they were on the ballot in 2024, because that would be a motivator for people to vote.
But what we realized in 2018, I worked on the anti-Brett Kavanaugh campaign, which was not successful, as you can totally tell since he's on the Supreme Court. But it built a coalition like no other in the sort of progressive left field, and frankly the moderate field of Americans. And that coalition helped us win in the midterms in 2018. No doubt it helped us in 2020 and in 2022. And so I would say the organizations built in Kansas, built in Ohio. I was just with the Ohio chair out at a conference last week. They've kept those coalitions alive to make sure the question one's result, which was to put abortion rights on their constitution, wasn't for naught. That they're going to keep that coalition engaged for elected officials up and down the ballot.
Okay, we're talking to Steve Kerrigan about the merits of what Joe Biden has done for president, which, according to Steve, should cause you to decide that Joe Biden should have a second term. By the way, texter with that 11,000 thing is citing numbers. Jamie looked this up from a report from the Republican members of the U.S. Senate Joint Economic Committee. They say the typical American household must spend an additional $11,400 annually just to maintain the same standard of living they enjoyed in January 2021. I never heard that before. You know, immigration, which in many places where you would not think would be a big issue, meaning non-border communities, is a big issue because of the cruelty and brilliance of people like DeSantis and Abbott of Texas, who have made their problem the problem of places like Massachusetts. Actually, we've talked a lot to the governor about it, and she's talked a lot about it too. The numbers, the border numbers are pretty horrible under Joe Biden. And this is an emotional issue too for a lot of people. In light of the fact there's going to be no comprehensive reform, obviously, maybe ever, but surely not in the next 8 months, how do you defend Biden's record on the immigration front?
Look, I know the president's focus and the vice president's focus, as this is an area for her in the administration, is to not just deal with the issue of people crossing the border, how we secure the border in general, but it's also dealing with root causes, which previous administrations don't tackle, working with Central and South American governments and economies there to shore them up so that folks don't feel the need to come to the United States of America. But you alluded to it. I mean, this is not a problem that is whose solution is not within reach. There's a bipartisan approach in the United States Senate right now that if the Speaker of the House chose to take up, there would be enough Democrats to pass it and enough Republicans would have to go over, just a handful, to actually pass true immigration reform.
But they're not about to do it.
They're not going to do it. And why? Because they know in the next 8 months they can ring this bell and hammer this home and scare the bejesus out of people all across the country about immigration. I mean, we saw it in a race in central Massachusetts where there was a flyer out there saying, in essence, that Maura Healey and that candidate were going to take your gun and put an immigrant in your house. There's no truth to that, but they are not above using lies, innuendo, and scare tactics to scare voters. What we have to do is continue to push back, show them really what President Biden has been doing, and frankly, ask Ron DeSantis, ask Greg Abbott, ask anybody who's really concerned about securing our southern border to call the Speaker of the House of Representatives and Republicans in the House and ask them to actually take up a bill that will pass.
Can we talk about something else that Marjorie and I consider one of the most significant contributions of Joe Biden? People here still at the library, how many of you know what Joe Biden did on Medicare and drug prices? Can you raise your hand if you know? There's one hand.
One hand.
Well, I would argue, and that's not to be disrespectful to you,
Right.
I would argue if I had to list the things, if I were the President of the United States, considering that older people, those on Medicare, vote in huge numbers, I'd be talking about this every 10 minutes. What did Joe Biden do? We've been discussing this on the show since we started.
Sure.
What did he address?
So for the first time since Medicare passed, and I worked in the United States Senate for a long time, the first time since Medicare passed, under Joe Biden's leadership and the Inflation Reduction Act, Medicare can actually negotiate drug prices for its patients. Now think about that. Everybody else, every other private provider, every other private insurance company can negotiate drug prices. Medicare itself was not allowed to negotiate. As a result, drug prices are going to fall significantly for people on Medicare. There is a cap now of $2,000 for people to spend. Insulin prices are no longer hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. They're $35 a month. Insulin, which is one of the most popularly prescribed drugs in America. It is a huge impact, and it is something that people have talked about ad nauseum for decades and done nothing about
But
since Joe Biden
isn't the
got here.
2,000 cap in 226 or something like that? It hasn't happened yet.
Sure. Well,
that's one of the problems, right?
It takes time. Which is the issue too with, they always say, presidents govern for about 18 months and then they've got to deal with midterms and then re-election.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that they got done, infrastructure,
that's right. Yep.
They're starting to put shovels in the ground now, so we're hoping folks will pay attention. I mean, they're on infrastructure alone. There's $16.1 billion funding 213 projects here in Massachusetts alone. You'll start seeing those.
By the way,
things
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in an arrogant sort of way. I mean it like we sort of know.
One thing, because I know we're running short of time here, one thing I really worry about, because I do think Biden versus Trump, Biden prevails. I'm really worried about third-party candidates, RFK Jr. I mean, I cannot believe the polling numbers for RFK Jr., who it seems to me is taking leave of his senses, but he's doing quite well. You have other people, Jill Stein, Green Party, Cornel West. How is Cornel doing? Is he still in the running?
I think he's still in the running.
Yeah. So I mean, these people could
really
hurt him.
In the end, you've got to ask yourself, if you're one of these third-party candidates, you've got to ask yourself, when you wake up in the morning, you're running for president of the United States, you've got to be going, 900 miles an hour toward that goal of taking that oath of office and enacting your policies. I don't think any one of the people you just listed believes for a second that they're going to take the oath of office, or frankly, the way they're running their campaigns, that it's going to influence those who will. And so, look, we're the United States of America. If you qualify and want to run for president, God bless you. But for people like Bobby Kennedy, he has an agenda that he wants to have folks address. I frankly think
That's called the nut agenda.
Totally.
Is that the technical name?
Look, I've known him for 30-something years, and I wouldn't vote for him for a dog catcher.
But it doesn't mean
and not just because of this agenda.
But it doesn't mean he can't really croak Joe Biden, or maybe he would croak Trump.
Well, I mean, it's where their votes are. It's where their votes are. So it's the important part is, are they taking away in Ohio, for instance? Would they be taking away from Biden or from Trump? I would argue a candidate who has spent a career in the last 10 years talking about anti-vaccine takes away from Trump than from Biden, but it is a risk, and it's something we'd rather not see.
Okay, and one last thing. Someone wants to know why the Democrats are not recruiting Taylor Swift to campaign.
Who says we're not? No. That's a very good question.
And one last quick thing.
We all love Taylor Swift. She opposed that woman. Who's the woman senator from Tennessee?
Didn't matter.
Oh yeah, Marsha Blackburn.
She opposed Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn's in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
So
I think in the end, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Everybody's
okay. Well, we'll have to have you back again because I have a lot more questions we didn't get to.
I got plenty of time.
But John,
I'll see you guys in Manchester next week.
I'll be back.
Oh, you will?
I will. Yeah.
We'll see you in Manchester.
See you then.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
Steve Kerrigan. Thank you so
very
much.
Steve
Chair
Kerrigan.
of the Democratic State Committee.
Coming in. We were speaking with Steve Kerrigan, chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. What was the thing about Massachusetts? All the stuff that's going on here. Did you write that down?
What the hell are you talking about?
That Steve just said.
$16 billion, and I did write it down.
$16 billion. Okay, thank you very much.
Infrastructure spending.
Okay, up next, thank you, Steve Kerrigan. We're going to talk with CNN's John King. He was in Iowa. Well, I don't know if he was in Iowa last night. He was on his board last night.
He was on the Magic Wall, yeah.
So I don't know where the Magic Wall was located, but we saw him at the Magic Wall last night talking about the Iowa vote. We're going to talk to him about it next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We're live from the library, streaming on Facebook.com. No, we're not. I'm sorry. YouTube.com/GBH News. We'll someday soon be streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News yet again. This Friday, Monday, and Tuesday of next week, we are broadcasting live from Manchester, New Hampshire. If you don't know why, go Google it. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent. We were watching them all last night, John King. He's involved with 2 great reporting projects in addition to the incredible work he does on election night all over the map and the battleground. John, it's good to see you sort of in person. Hi, John.
Welcome. This is my home just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm packing my bag because I'm coming to New Hampshire. Later tonight, I'll be there. So I know why you're going to be in Manchester next week. I know.
Yeah, we are. And
Very astute, John King.
And I hope you can join us when we're in Manchester.
Yeah, we hope you can join us.
I'm going to try to find, if I'm there, I will find a way.
Oh, thank you very much. The Dorchester fans are waiting for your perspective from up there in Manchester. But John King, I'm always stunned with the reporting you do, some of the, man in the street kind of thing that the reporters have been doing up in Iowa.
Women too.
That's right. Well, I just man on the street is what you kind of call it, right? We don't call it woman in the street, although I don't mean to be sexist about it. But in any case, the one-to-one reporting, why are you voting for so-and-so? All these people that seem, as you put them, good, hard-working Americans, and then you hear these wild conspiracy theories coming out of their mouths, and I just get so depressed about it. But, there are a bunch of seemingly very nice people last night that voted for...
What's the question? Are they nice people? Is that the question?
No, I guess, my question is, what do you make of the vote last night?
Well, it's an overwhelming win for Trump, and it makes it much harder. DeSantis is staying in, which helps Trump. Trump is very happy. Iowa is a double win for Trump. He wins and he's over 50%. So it's hard. Yes, half the party still wants somebody else, but that's an overwhelming win in a crowded field. And then there's so much gap between him and second and third. And DeSantis came in second, so there's still some pressure on him to get out because the path ahead isn't great, but he's going to stay at least through New Hampshire. And so that helps Trump. The longer, welcome to 2016 all over again. It's not as big a field, but the longer the opposition to Trump is fractured, the better for Trump. And so New Hampshire's next. That is, I would say Haley still has the best of the bad long shots to get Donald Trump. The odds are not great. Can she beat him in New Hampshire? Maybe. Will that open it up? Tough. You're running to the place in Iowa. Democrats and independents can show up if you want and change your registration on caucus day. In New Hampshire, as we all know, undeclared voters, Democrats, if they want, can vote in the New Hampshire primary. Once you get past that, there are a couple left, but there's more and more closed primaries where only registered Republicans can vote. So Haley doesn't just have to beat Trump somewhere. She has to change the psyche of Republicans, Trump voters, of enough Trump voters to convince them this guy is vulnerable or we want to look somewhere else. And when you get 50% in Iowa, and DeSantis and Haley both stay in, that has not happened yet. And so we'll see if it happens in New Hampshire. I could be wrong about this. I would argue if you don't get Trump very early. So Iowa's done. Big win. New Hampshire's next. Then Nevada, which the caucuses give the delegates in Nevada, and the state party there is wired for Trump, and then South Carolina. So Haley has to, in my view, has to do this in New Hampshire and then build on it in South Carolina, or else the Trump snowball is going down the hill. The winner-take-all primaries come in, the closed Republican primaries come in, and by mid-March, he'll have all the delegates.
We're talking to John King. John, some of the entrance poll stuff that was on CNN last night, I think I have the number right, 68% of the Republicans who attended the caucuses don't think Joe Biden won the election, which I just, whatever, 68% don't. And 32% said a vast majority, I think it was roughly 2/3, said they'd support him even if he's convicted of a crime. Only 32% said they would not. Scott, I think his name is Jennings, who is a semi-sane Republican, who's a commentator on your station all the time, was focused on the discussions last night in the studio, your studio, CNN studio, on the 32%, saying it's a large number. If 32% of Republicans, say they won't vote for him if he's convicted of a crime, and he's convicted, that's the end of him. From my perspective, that's optimistic if you don't want Trump to be president. My read on that number, in a second I want to get yours, is those are the 32% who either passionately supported Haley or DeSantis, and it was an extension of that. And if the field is only Trump on the Republican side, the 32% potentially disappears. What was your take on that number?
I think Scott was speaking as a smart campaign strategist. So I agree with both of you in the sense that I think you are right that if Trump keeps winning over time, that number will shrink because the loyal Republicans who might want somebody else right now, but who can't stomach voting for a Democrat in any case, and especially might have personal reasons or particular policy reasons against Biden right now, I think that number would shrink. I think you're absolutely right about that. That's your partisan instinct on, if you're for somebody else. Mm-hmm. But if you're Scott Jennings and you're running a campaign, you're like, what are our weaknesses? Yeah. Right. So even if that number shrunk, Jim, to 5 or 6%, that's still an opportunity for the Democrats. That's still an opportunity for Biden because we know, again, this election is most likely to come down to Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, maybe Nevada, and somewhere in the ballpark of 75 to 150,000 votes divided among those handful of states I just mentioned who will decide our president, just like what happened in 2016 and what happened in 2020. And so if there's a group of people on the other guy's team, who would normally play on the other guy's team, who don't want to vote for him, that's your opportunity for Biden. I think Scott's point was that's a trouble spot for Republican. If it's 32% in Iowa today, even if it's 8 or 10% or 5%, Michigan or Wisconsin come November, that's an opportunity.
So, John King, when you go out and interview these different voters, and they say something like Biden didn't win the election, or Biden is the one that's going after Trump and all these hearings and all this kind of stuff, does the conversation continue? Do you ask them why they think that or where they got those ideas?
Yeah, and that's sad and frustrating to me because, look, I think Democrats make a mistake when they think they're all idiots, they're all morons, they're all deplorables.
No, that's what I'm saying.
They're all
these
whatever.
people seem like lovely people.
They're your brothers and your sisters, they're your neighbors, they're their doctors, your lawyers, they're your car mechanics. They're all across the economic spectrum. A lot of them are, church-going, job-creating pillars of their community who believe stuff that is simply not true.
Right.
It's not all Trump. It's not all Trump. This is 25 years of Rupert Murdoch and Fox News, and then all the copycats who want to tell them, that the Democrats are ruining America, and the Democrats are stealing elections, and the Democrats are cheating. So it didn't start with Trump, but Trump has put it on steroids, and now there are all these copycats where these people stay in their silos and believe only what they hear there. And so it's frustrating. The refreshing part to me in the group that we have are the Trump voters we have in Iowa, the Trump voters we have in New Hampshire, and we're starting to expand our groups in Nevada as well, is that they are willing, most of them are willing to have a conversation. And I'll be saying, if I send you something, will you read it? Will you look at this? I'm not saying you're going to win this over. I'm not going to win it over. I've said this before to you guys. None of us are going to win it over because of what we do for a living.
Right.
This is a generational challenge of brothers and sisters and coworkers and friends and ministers and whoever they listen to and trust, giving people a little shake and say, look again. Look again. But this is why Trump has never stopped saying this, because he was planning to run again. And he knows if you start to change your mind about he lost. And then he tried to stay in power before our eyes. We all saw that. We all saw that. If people somehow think, okay, he lost, meaning he's a loser, right? I like his policies, but can he win? You move away from that, right? If your team's not competitive, you might fire the coach. A little Foxborough analogy there. Your team's not competitive. Your team's not competitive as much as you love him and as much as you think you owe him. You might say it's time to move on. That is why Trump cynically will not stop with all of his lies about the election, about January 6th, et cetera, because if people stopped for a minute and started thinking about it, did their own homework, he would start to lose support. But that's a generational challenge. That's not going to happen between now and November.
We're talking to John King from CNN. John, I guess this is asking the same question a different way, so I'll do it fairly quickly. Most candidates, after they leave Iowa, either go to New Hampshire or some go to South Carolina, because that's next. After New Hampshire, Donald Trump chose not to go directly. He decided instead to go to the opening arguments in a case which is a follow-up, a defamation case, to a civil matter, in which he was found to have sexually abused E. Jean Carroll. Here's the way the question is the same. When voters who are Trump-ophiles parrot his words and say, Joe Biden is behind Jack Smith and the Justice Department going after him, as ridiculous as that is, you can sort of see the connection. When they wake up this morning and sees in a civil trial in New York where he's been found liable for sexual abuse and now he's on trial for defaming the woman he sexually abused, do they think the same thing, that Joe Biden is behind this too? Or they just don't think about it? It gets lost in the whole thing.
I know what they think.
Well, let's do John and then you.
Yeah, my conversations on this one with voters, it's more that she's out to get him, that people come out of the woodwork, people from New York. She's from New York. She's in the magazines. She's in the arts and culture community. She's one of them. She's one of the liberal elites, the New York version of the Hollywood elites. And they're out to get Trump, and they will say and do anything to get him. I do think you raised a key point here, Jim, that is separate from the other charges where Trump says the system's out to get him. Trump made some progress in Iowa. They're Republicans, so don't overdo this, but watch this as we go forward. He made some progress last night in rebuilding support in the suburbs, at least among Republican women. Now, Iowa's more conservative than most of America, so I'm not saying that applies to the Milwaukee suburbs or the Philadelphia suburbs or the Cleveland suburbs or anywhere else, but it is something to keep an eye on. Trump did make some progress among suburbanites, including suburban women in Iowa last night. That is food for thought as we go forward. Those are the same women, I think, that will be absolutely repulsed and probably not accept Trump's argument about the E. Jean Carroll thing. So there are these forces at play, sort of the tug of war, right? They don't like Biden. They think he's too old. They don't like his policies. They've been punished by inflation. So they're maybe coming back to Trump. And then they're going to see some of this stuff. And it's horrible. That's what they hate about Trump. And so we are, as I said yesterday, was day one, which is page one of the voting. We got a long way to go. Whether you want to call this a drama, whether you want to call this a book, we're in the first couple pages the morning after Iowa. We got a ways to go, and those are the competing pressures.
So what do we think, you touched on this before, but Haley is hoping to do much better in New Hampshire. So what do you think? What's your prediction?
Look, she's got the governor on her side. The polling has showed she closed in. Christie getting out. Most of those voters should go to her, although he says he won't endorse unless she says, I won't join Trump on the ticket and I won't vote for Trump. So we'll watch that play. Asa Hutchinson suspended his campaign today. A lot of people roll their eyes and say, so what? If you're Nikki Haley right now, whether it's one person, two person, 8 people, or 10 people, anybody out there who doesn't want to vote for Donald Trump, you want to hug and you want to find, and your campaign wants to get in touch with them and get them on your list. So there's an opportunity here. I see Governor Sununu today saying a strong second would be good in New Hampshire. I get it, but that's spin. I don't think it would be. I just don't. We'll see. Never say never. Joe Biden lost the first 3 contests and he's president of the United States. He lost the first 3 primaries, in 2020. So you never say never, but we saw the depth of Donald Trump's support in rural, small-town America, in the suburbs, in medium-sized cities, that if you just look at the calendar when you start going to these Midwestern states and these Western states and the prairie states and the farm states, you have to puncture Trump early. And I know it's confounding to a lot of people, but he's very popular among Republicans. He has convinced them of his lies or sold many of them on his lies. If you're going to get him, you don't have to beat him. You have to change the psyche of the Republican Party that this guy, he's losing to Nikki Haley, therefore he will lose to Joe Biden. That's what she needs. That's what she needs to, that's Republican psychology, the zeitgeist to change. And I could be wrong about this, but I think you got to beat him to do that. I don't think coming in, second place again, and then he wins Nevada. I guess if she then won South Carolina, maybe I'd be wrong. Maybe if you turned it into that kind of a springboard, but I think she needs a rocket ship. She does not need a decent boat on the water. She needs an aircraft carrier. Not a PT boat or not a destroyer. She needs to become an aircraft carrier to beat him. And I think the only way you do that is by winning, not by, okay, I was a distant third in Iowa. Look, I was a close second in New Hampshire. I don't think that's good enough.
And she's suspected to do poorly in her own state, which looks pretty bad, I think, to the average Jane or Joe.
If she wins, maybe it changes that. A dynamic to keep an eye on. My colleague Mano Raju was talking about this last night, and I talked to some Trump people in the last few days about this. Trump is calling Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who dropped out of the race, almost every day, trying to get the endorsement of Tim Scott when you go into South Carolina. If Haley won New Hampshire, that might give Scott a little pause about doing that. We'll have to see how that plays out. But we have a lot of pieces on the chessboard still to play.
Okay, so John, I'm going to ask the same question for the 4th time, just in a different form until I get the answer I want. Is that okay? So Donald Trump wins all these primaries. March 5th is Super Tuesday, including us, I think, Massachusetts. And he's the de facto nominee, even though he doesn't have the formal number of delegates. And then we approach convention time, which I think is in July. And somewhere in the middle there, the trial, the most serious trial, I would argue, that's scheduled for March 4th, actually happens, delayed a little bit while they're deciding whether or not he's got immunity. They decide he doesn't. And there's a trial, and he's convicted ahead of the Republican convention of what I think normal people would consider to be very serious charges for anybody, much less a future and a past and wannabe president in the future. Does that matter in your estimation, or does it not matter?
Based on everything I see today, it doesn't matter enough. The rules would allow the delegates to replace him.
They do.
Yeah, the rules would allow someone to come forward and say, let's suspend the rules. Donald Trump has enough delegates to win the nomination, but let's suspend the rules and rewrite new rules right now. But the Trump people learned, Jim, Donald Trump's campaign was sort of a fly-by-night effort in 2016. They have smart professionals this time. Remember, that's when he brought in his buddy Paul Manafort, the now infamous Paul Manafort, the 2016 convention, because they were worried Ted Cruz was going to contest the content, and that's why they picked Mike Pence. They picked a social Christian conservative to quiet the evangelicals and other conservatives who are saying Trump's not one of us. Let's take it from him at the convention. Now, what have they done? They have worked these state parties very smartly and very diligently. The delegates who show up in Milwaukee are Trump people. They're going to be Trump people. They are not going to be, I want to be a delegate to the convention. Oh, Donald Trump. Okay, sure, I do that. I just want to go to the convention. These are going to be true believers. So if you're going to raise your hand, so what? Vivek Ramaswamy's going to walk out, or Ron DeSantis is going to walk out and say, he's going to lose in November. Come to me. Good luck.
Okay, so John, since you've been so busy, obviously, with the caucus and the primary, you probably don't know it. I don't want to upset you. Bill Belichick is no longer the coach of the New England Patriots. You can take a second to recover. What's your reaction to his disappearance? He's obviously going to get another job somewhere in all likelihood. And Jerod Mayo, a far less known individual to non-Patriots fans, ascension to the crown.
I loved Jerod Mayo as a player. I loved him. He was one of the guys who looked, every play was 100% speed, 110% speed, great attitude, always a great community guy. So I look forward to the opportunities that pick up the Globe. You don't need John King of Dorchester to tell you this. Pick up the Globe or the Herald. A lot of questions about his experience. Is he ready to be at this level? So we're going to find out, right? If you look around the league, there are a lot of these new young coaches that have done amazingly well right out of the box. Every now and then, some of them flame out. Some of them flame out, for whatever reason. So look, the decision has been made. Here we go. We're on to Mayo. I'll use a Belichickian term there. We're on to Jerod Mayo now. Look, as I said at the beginning when I made the joke about this, sometimes you can have a really good thing for a long time. You can like and respect each other, and you just realize it's time to move on. And that's the decision the Krafts made. They own the team. They have the right to make that. I could argue loyalty to Bill Belichick, give him one more chance. I don't think you're ever going to bring, even if Bill Belichick says you can bring in a GM and I'll give him draft power and player personnel power, who's going to take that job? Who seriously is going to take that job after Belichick's done it his way for 25 years? So I completely get it. And I wish the coach, the hoodie, the best in the future. I'm assuming he's going to land in Atlanta or Dallas. And we'll keep our fingers crossed. I think a new coach, new culture, new energy would be good for the Patriots. If you look at the roster, it's going to take a few years, at least, to rebuild that team. Talent-wise, that's not Belichick's fault. I mean, it is his fault because he drafted the players. But in terms of how they played on the field, it's not just coaching. They need a lot of talent.
Hey, John, you were great last night. I know
you're
Marjorie
always
feels
great.
the same way. Thanks. We really enjoyed watching and listening to you. And we hope we'll see you in New Hampshire.
Thank you.
I hope I get that chance.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John King.
We're speaking with CNN's John King. He's chief national correspondent and involved in two great reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map and the battleground. Coming up, since we didn't get to talk about it at the beginning of the show, we're going to open the text and phone lines to you, 877-301-8970. Iowa's done. New Hampshire is next. How are you feeling in this election cycle with Trump still front and center and clearly the big megastar of the Republican Party? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on something. I don't know what it is, but we're not streaming on the other thing, so figure it out.
YouTube.com/GBH News.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Friday and Monday and Tuesday of next week, we'll be streaming on everything. Facebook, YouTube, anything, a tin can. We're going to be in Manchester, New Hampshire for the primary, which is Tuesday. Check us out. Come to New Hampshire. Come to the library and watch it, whatever. We just talked about Iowa with Sue O'Connell. Well, we actually talked about Iowa with the mayor, too. The mayor, Sue O'Connell, Steve Kerrigan, and John King. Now we want to open the phone and text lines, get your thoughts on what happened last night in Iowa, 877-301-8970. It was an absolute trouncing of his opponents in Iowa, the largest margin of victory by far in the history of contested caucuses out there. Trump's now in New York to face a jury, as I said, in E. Jean Carroll's defamation suit. By the way, he doesn't have to be there, so he's obviously there because he thinks it helps his cause, that he defamed the woman he sexually abused, allegedly defamed. He's already been, as I said, found civilly liable in front of this judge for sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll, ordered to pay her at least $2 million. This is a new defamation case. Then he's off to New Hampshire. His election interference case set to go on trial on March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday. I mean, it's incredible. In any case, 877-301-8970. We don't know what's going to happen in those cases. We do know that he trounced Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis yesterday. Despite that, here are the two candidates, the ones who came in second and third, with, some might argue, delusions of grandeur after getting crushed in Iowa. First DeSantis and then Haley.
Because of your support, in spite of all of that they threw at us, everyone against us, we've got our ticket punched out of Iowa.
Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
I have to say, when you're in politics, you have to be able to say whatever you have to. I don't know if I could have said either of those things if I was DeSantis or Haley. It's a real long shot at this stage, despite the fact, CNN poll, Haley's only 7 behind Trump in New Hampshire. We want to know what your takeaway is from yesterday. A guy who's been indicted for 91 alleged crimes, the sexual abuse finding, the fraud finding, also in a New York courtroom, and everything else that goes with it, separating kids from their families, putting kids in cages on the southern border. He crushed everyone in the race yesterday, historically crushed them in Iowa. We want to get your reaction. 877-301-8970.
You know, you mentioned this case with the sexual assault with Jean Carroll. It doesn't matter. I mean, that doesn't matter. It's terrible. We wouldn't be where we are with abortion rights if it matters. One of our texters just said, Trump's ongoing popularity demonstrates women don't matter in this country. Dozens of women have accused him of sexual assault. It doesn't matter. Dozens of men have accused him, or dozens of children. It might matter. I'm not sure if that's true either. I mean, there are all sorts of people who get accused of sexual assault, and people say all the time, oh, well, why did she wait so long to bring it up?
He's not accused of sexual assault.
He's convicted.
He's been found liable, not convicted. He's been found liable. For sexual abuse of this woman.
I think, you know, the people say the same thing. Jean Carroll's out to make money. The kids of the Catholic Church are out to make money.
You and John both said
Why
the
did
same
they wait
thing.
so long? It's really disgraceful, the excuses that we make for rapists all the time. And what they did find in New York, you're right, it's a civil case, not a criminal case, but that he raped her.
Yeah.
And 24 women accused him of sexual crimes before, which I would call crimes, before his election. It didn't matter.
Can I make not a correction, but an explanation so we don't get text? When Marjorie says that he was found liable of raping, and we've discussed this a million times here, under the eccentricity of the New York law, what would be considered rape under our law in Massachusetts is considered sexual abuse in New York. So
Correct.
That's the technical situation. He did something really horrible to E. Jean Carroll, according to a jury of his peers. And, you know, it's sort of when John was talking about, oh, they're only New Yorkers, the Iowans think. Well, you know who also has been a New Yorker his whole life? Donald Trump, hanging out with, partying with all these same people who theoretically are out to get him. Susan in a car, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
So the perspective I'm interested in is the language that's being used to describe Trump's status in Iowa. I listened to another talk show earlier this morning that said that the number of people that actually showed up for the caucus was very small
It was.
and not really even representative of Iowa.
Yeah.
But yet, everybody in the media is using very large positive superlatives about what Trump did. And I'm wondering, I'd like you to discuss if saying his overwhelming victory and all that kind of stuff is actually helping him, even if you're not for him.
Well, let me just say two things. One, we started the show by saying it was the smallest turnout. I don't think we started. We said
Yeah, it's like
maybe
120
115,000.
180 usually.
Yeah, that's one. Two, those are the rules. Those who show up get to vote. And I assume, with all due respect, Susan, if your hope was, as mine was, that someone like Nikki Haley, who is not my cup of tea, but surely is more my cup of tea than Donald Trump, would beat him, if she had beaten him in Iowa with only 115,000 votes, we'd be celebrating the wisdom of the only 115,000 voters. So yes, it is true, there was a small turnout, but that's the way the elections run. Those who choose to show up get to make the determination. And of those who showed up, he did trounce the opposition. So I hear you, but in the words of whomever, it is what it is. Susan, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8097.
I mentioned this piece before by Michael Bender in the New York Times and Katie Gluick in the New York Times. They're talking about the headline is the most durable force in American politics today, Donald Trump's ties to his voters. And they talk about how people are just besotted with him, the people that are in his camp. The depth of the reservoir of devotion inside his party is astonishing. For 8 years, he's nurtured a relationship with his supporters with little precedent in politics. Trump validates them. He entertains them. He speaks for them. He uses them for political and legal advantage. He has earned a bond with them. There's this real cult thing with Trump, who is, as we know, a fraudster and a con man, and a lot of con men are able to do it. He's also extremely there's something mesmerizing about watching him in action, and he's made politics fun for a certain number of people because he's their hero.
And because they ignore the facts, as you say, most people don't support people who lose unless they're people of great principle. He lost the presidential election. He lost the Senate. He then back-counted, because of what he did, those 2 Georgia seats amazingly went to Democrats, which gave the Democrats a majority. He lost the midterms. I mean, he has, other than when he beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, he has a history of losing. And I would bet, we just saw that number, 68 or 70%, I can't remember, the CNN poll, think that Joe Biden was not duly elected as president. And that's the brilliance of the huckster, is he's convinced, as you said, all these people that what is fact is not. I mean, it's frightening. Mark in Kingston, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about Iowa and beyond. Hi.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Something to put on your mug or a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Lie, cheat, steal, you could be president.
Yeah.
White House, poor house, big house.
Yeah.
Well, can I tell you something, though, Mark? This shouldn't make anybody feel better. We've had this discussion a million times. I don't think anybody I've ever seen in politics in the past or now could do what Trump is doing. And I don't mean that at all Trumpism disappears when he disappears, but he is a one-of-a-kind huckster. And he's really good at that particular part of what he does. Mark, thanks for the call.
And you're good at exposing him for it.
What's that?
You've done a great job.
Well, we've done such a great job that he's about to be the Republican nominee, and if the election were today, he'd be the president. That's how good a job we did. But thank you for your kindness, regardless, Mark. Thanks.
He learned at his father's knee.
He
learned
did.
From Roy Cohn, who you remember was the lawyer in the McCarthy hearings.
Sure.
And in McCarthy hearings, you had all these people hauled into court, actors, actresses, famous people that had done very good things in their lives ruined because Roy Cohn was instrumental in having people leave. These people were all communists and they were anti-American. This went on for quite some time, right, with McCarthy. And it's the same thing with Trump. He's learned that you tell the lie over and over and over again, and people believe it. And he's very effective at what he does. He was on television for a long time, perfected his skills in The Apprentice, and he has a way. People, I think, are just besotted with the guy.
Well, you almost touched on the story we've told a lot of times, but it's worth telling one more time. You mentioned, obviously, the connection that the lawyer had to the McCarthy hearings. It was told by Michael Kirk brilliantly in that thing he does every 4 years. I think it's called The Choice.
Yep.
2 hours on each candidate. And it's been written about elsewhere, is when Trump was sued for housing discrimination in New York decades and decades ago. His lawyers, Roy Cohn, they got eviscerated in the case. They lost, that means.
It's racist discrimination.
Exactly. And they came out on the steps of the courthouse and they say they won. And they said it relentlessly. And that's the lesson that was learned, you were suggesting, by Donald Trump, is if you just boldly assert a lie relentlessly and never give an inch, which he never does, enough people, at least in 2016, believe you.
Well, I guess, we talk a lot about the two silos people are in. John King mentioned to it, Rupert Murdoch has done this with Fox News and there's his acolytes, Steve Bannon and these AM radio shows and all that kind of stuff. But what's disheartening, I guess, is that so many Americans can't see reality. It's a little disturbing with all the access we have to real, truthful, factual matters that so many of us are so easily conned, I guess.
What's that great expression about you choosing the media that agrees with your worldview? There's a great term for that. What's
I don't
that
know,
term?
but I think that's what you do. I mean, that's why places like Media Matters are really good. Or, what's really good? I gave this to a family member for Christmas, Network of Lies, the Brian Stelter book about Fox News, and it's brilliant because it exposes all these lies. And remember, they had to pay almost $1 billion. How much? $780 million for lying over and over and over again about the election being lost. And I think that was part of the reason why Mr. Pillow, Mike Lindell, they don't run his ads on Fox anymore. It was supposedly because he didn't pay the bill, but he kept keeping this up. You know what I mean? And you see how they're careful now not to keep repeating that because it costs them so much
by
money.
the way, isn't that heartening in a way? Assuming he is in huge financial trouble,
yeah.
And the allegation is that, again, they're dropping his commercials because he's not paying, and I assume that's true. It is heartening. The only reason it's not because his product is any worse than it was 2 years ago. It's because a significant number of people who otherwise would have bought the product have decided they're not going to subsidize the wealth of an election denier, which I think is actually a heartening kind of thing,
Skull, if I'm pronouncing it right, in Rosendale.
Hey, Skull.
Thank you for calling.
Hey.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I think that the problem with Democrats is they let the Republicans frame the argument. Whenever you hear Biden referred to crooked Joe Biden, it's an example. I think when you refer to Trump, you should preface it by saying loser, liar, con man, traitor. And instead of calling MAGA Republicans, call them what they are. They're a bunch of bum kissers. And so you shouldn't say MAGA anymore. You should just say those people who will kiss Trump's bum.
Well, it'd be really great. I can see Joe Biden doing a speech and saying, I want to be elected to represent all the people that vote for me and all of you bum kissers out there. I think that would go well. Skull, thank you very much for the call. By the way, a major moment, which unfortunately did not end Trump's reign with the eyes of his supporters, was when the media finally decided to do the right thing and call a lie a lie. Mm-hmm. We actually talked to Marty Barron about that, former editor of the Washington Post and others, but it's pretty important that those words be said, and I hope come November they sort of bore in.
Aaron from Lakeville is staying positive. He says, remember, 1 out of 2 people in the Iowa caucuses did not vote for Donald Trump, so there you go. Yeah. Half the people voted for somebody else.
That's a nice try, I'd say.
I guess that's
largest majority in the history of the Iowa contested caucuses. By the way, so let's talk about us, which is really what matters. Yep. So Trump runs, and despite what you continue to say every day, I assume this is to keep your spirits up, he wins in November. How do you deal with this?
I don't know. We were talking before the show, we were making jokes about who had grandparents that came from other countries, so you can go to citizenship there. If someone can go to Italy, I can go to Ireland, become an Irish citizen. I guess you can't go anywhere, Jim, because your grandparents came from
They're
here.
from Eastern Europe.
Yeah, but are they grandparents? Because that means you could go to Eastern Europe. Yeah, maybe you can do that.
I'm thinking of going to Belarus, actually, because they've done some really good things
in recent years with
the
with
rest
Vladimir
of the staff
Putin.
will be in Ireland and Italy.
You know, by the
We'll
way,
visit you.
I am very, this is a serious comment. There's not a joke at the end of this. I am really careful with my language about Trump, despite how despicable I find him to be as a human being. It is not, he is Hitler-esque in his comments. It is reasonable to conclude, based upon how he governed and what he talks about doing to his enemies, otherwise known as staff who disagreed with him, that this would be a dictatorship. And that he'd probably, assuming he lived long enough, never leave the presidency. Is that unfair description of what is likely to come from a second term?
No, I don't think so. It's a good thing we're Boston Public Radio. We're kind of
Why is
small
that?
fries, because otherwise we might be on his hit list of people that he's going to jail, that have reporters and commentators that have been against him. You know, the bigwigs better watch out.
Did you see on CNN the other, speaking of a dissident and a courageous soul?
John King. John King could be in trouble here.
Do you see where Navalny is in jail in
It's
Russia?
some horrible.
It's just, and the courage of this guy to continue to speak out against Putin, knowing that the likelihood is he's going to spend his life in that kind of incarceration, if not killed, is really, can you imagine that kind of courage? Neither can I. Let's go to Paul in a car. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, hi. So I went to see the movie Napoleon. And Napoleon, of course, you know, was exiled.
Yes.
And then he comes back.
Yeah.
And, you know, they welcome him back.
Yeah.
You know, and why? Why? Because they love him. He's a charismatic dictator. And I think that's his trump card. He can lie, January 6th, everything. You know, we all hate him. We can see through him. But there's enough people out there that this is who they love. They love him.
Paul, you have a great idea. Why don't we exile Trump to Elba for a couple of years, see how that goes, and then if he comes back, we'll deal with it. Exactly. Paul, thank you for your historical
So I always
reference
get a
there.
half dozen of these emails when we talk about lying about the election, and people that think that Hillary lied about the election being stolen from her. She talked about winning the popular vote, which she did. But
No, she also talked about Russian influence in the
and
election.
there was Russian influence in the election, but I think she shut up briefly. She didn't run again on a platform of having trying to claim to people that the election was won by her, because it wasn't, because of the
Can I tell you something? One of the things I'm proud about our work, and I rarely say good things about what we do, we always end the show on an up note.
Oh,
we really
almost
do.
time to go.
And we have really lifted people's spirits.
I think the thing is,
at the end of today's show.
you have to keep your sense of humor, Jim.
We do?
Yep. I mean, we're still in the United States of America, thank
We are.
God. And hopefully things can't get that bad around here. That's what I think.
Beautiful.
Isn't
That's
that
really
great?
a beautiful sentiment. It really is. It's moving. It's loving. It's beautiful.
Yeah, things could be worse. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. And we hope they won't be worse. We hope it will come
they won't
through
be worse.
in November of 2024. Anyway, tomorrow we're going to be joined by Boston Globe, NH, and Rhode Island editor Lila Alphonse. That's New Hampshire and Rhode Island, I should have said.
NH, yeah.
Yes, that's New
initials for
Hampshire. Yeah, because we're the primaries in New Hampshire, of course.
We just left IA. Do you know that?
RI.
IA.
What's
That's
that?
Iowa.
Oh, Iowa.
We just left
Okay.
Iowa.
Rhode Island editor.
I'm from PA.
Okay, you're from PA.
Okay, fine.
Harvard National Security
You're
expert
from
Juliet
FR,
Klein is going to be
Fall
with us.
River.
Journalist S. Mitra Kalita on the Claudine Gay
Yeah.
fallout and diversity efforts in media.
Yeah.
Naturalist Cy Montgomery. It's always uplifting to talk to Cy Montgomery. And a panel on dyslexia in Massachusetts schools with Nancy Duggan, Executive Director of the Decoding Dyslexia Massachusetts, and Jennifer Curtis, former Superintendent of the Weymouth Public Schools.
VT is Vermont, you know.
VT is Vermont. That is
Do you know
correct,
that?
Jim. Yeah, we're not going there. We're going to NH.
NY is New
All
York.
right, yes.
I'm just trying to fill it out.
MA
for
is
you.
Massachusetts.
It is. That is
Yep.
exactly right.
Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to BPL team, Maddie Geyer, Sandra Lopez Burke, Angelica Marrero. We have a podcast called Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with that 24/7. We have a 3-hour one and a half-hour one. And thanks to all the people at Newsfeed Cafe today, people that came down to the Boston Public Library. I'm Marjorie Egan.
MN, Minnesota, for example. No, I'm going to do them all. If you come down to the library at 2:15, I'll do it on the sidewalk.
We're very excited
out here.
about
See you
that,
tomorrow.
Jim.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.